Beyond the veil of reality, where the material universe gives way to the labyrinthine passages of the Webway, lies Commorragh, a realm that exists as a testament to the Dark Eldar's mastery over dimensional manipulation and their complete abandonment of moral constraint. This is not merely a city in any conventional sense, but rather a vast dimensional pocket that has been carved from the very fabric of the Webway itself, existing in a state of perpetual expansion and architectural impossibility that defies the natural laws governing real space. The creation of Commorragh represents one of the most ambitious engineering projects ever undertaken by the Eldar race, predating even the fall that consumed their empire. Originally conceived as a series of interconnected port cities within the Webway, these settlements served as crucial waypoints for Eldar vessels traversing the ancient network of tunnels that crisscrossed the galaxy. However, as the Eldar Empire descended into hedonistic excess and moral decay, these port cities began to attract the most depraved elements of their society, those who sought to escape the growing influence of Slaanesh while continuing their pursuit of ever greater sensations and pleasures. The dimensional pocket that houses Commorragh exists in a state of controlled instability, maintained through a delicate balance of ancient technology and the constant influx of psychic energy derived from suffering. Unlike the chaotic realm of the warp, where emotions and thoughts take on physical form and demons hold sway, Commorragh exists within the Webway's protective embrace, shielded from the predations of chaos while remaining fundamentally separate from the material universe. This separation is both the city's greatest strength and its most critical weakness, as it renders the Dark Eldar inhabitants incapable of sustaining themselves through natural means. The architecture of Commorragh stretches across dimensions in ways that would drive mortal minds to madness. Spires of crystalline bone and living metal extend upward for kilometers, their surfaces carved with intricate patterns that shift and writhe when observed directly. These towers serve multiple purposes, as residences for the Dark Eldar nobility, as fortresses for the various kabals that rule different districts, and as monuments to the twisted aesthetic sensibilities of their builders. The construction materials themselves tell a story of conquest and cruelty, with many structures incorporating the bones of extinct species, metals forged from the compressed remains of destroyed worlds, and stones that weep tears of liquid agony when touched by living flesh. The city's districts float in apparent defiance of gravity, connected by bridges of hardened shadow and platforms that drift through the air according to the whims of their Dark Eldar masters. These floating sections can be repositioned at will, allowing the rulers of Commorragh to reconfigure their domain as needed for defense, entertainment, or simple aesthetic preference. Some districts hang suspended from massive chains forged from the same materials as the Webway itself, while others appear to exist in a state of controlled free fall, their inhabitants moving through three-dimensional space with the fluid grace characteristic of their species. The absence of natural gravitational forces in many areas of Commorragh has led to architectural innovations that would be impossible in real space. Buildings spiral through the air in helical patterns, their rooms and corridors oriented in multiple directions to accommodate inhabitants who might approach from any angle. Gardens of crystalline plants grow in all directions from central nodes, their razor-sharp leaves catching and reflecting the eternal twilight that bathes the city. Water features flow upward as easily as down, creating cascades and fountains that form complex three-dimensional patterns as they move through the air. The lighting of Commorragh comes from a collection of captured suns, stellar bodies that have been torn from their natural positions in real space and imprisoned within the dimensional pocket through the application of technologies that border on the incomprehensible. These suns burn with a cold, artificial light that casts everything in shades of purple, green, and sickly yellow. The light they provide is not the warm, life-giving radiance of natural stars, but rather a harsh illumination that seems to leach vitality from everything it touches. The captured suns themselves show signs of their unnatural imprisonment. Their surfaces are marked with dark spots and flares that pulse in rhythm with the suffering of the city's countless slaves. The eternal twilight created by these imprisoned stars ensures that Commorragh never experiences the natural cycle of day and night that governs life in real space. This perpetual dusk serves multiple purposes for the Dark Eldar inhabitants. It provides the dim lighting they prefer for their activities, creates an atmosphere of perpetual unease among their captives, and serves as a constant reminder of their mastery over the fundamental forces of the universe. The absence of natural temporal cycles also contributes to the psychological torture of slaves and prisoners, who quickly lose track of time and find themselves unable to maintain the mental anchors that help preserve sanity during prolonged captivity. The relationship between Commorragh and real space is fundamentally parasitic in nature. The Dark Eldar cannot create or sustain life within their dimensional pocket through natural means, as the separation from the material universe that protects them from Slaanesh also cuts them off from the natural flow of psychic energy that sustains all Eldar. Instead, they must venture forth into real space to capture living beings whose suffering and eventual death can provide the psychic sustenance they require. This creates a cycle of predation that has continued for millennia, with the Dark Eldar launching raids across the galaxy to harvest the pain and terror of other species. The city's infrastructure reflects this parasitic relationship through its design and function. Slave pens stretch for kilometers beneath the floating districts, their walls lined with devices designed to maximize the suffering of their occupants while keeping them alive for as long as possible. Processing facilities convert captured victims into various forms of psychic energy, their screams and agony transformed into the currency that powers Commorragh's impossible architecture. Distribution networks carry this harvested suffering throughout the city, feeding it to the various systems that maintain the dimensional pocket's stability and provide sustenance to its Dark Eldar inhabitants. The complete separation from the warp's influence that characterizes Commorragh represents both the city's greatest achievement and its most fundamental limitation. While this separation protects the Dark Eldar from Slaanesh's hunger, it also renders them incapable of the psychic manipulation that comes naturally to their craftworld cousins. Dark Eldar psychers, known as those who have opened their third eye, are rare and typically short-lived, as the use of psychic powers within Commorragh attracts the attention of entities that can breach even the Webway's protections. This psychic isolation has profound implications for the city's culture and technology. Dark Eldar science has evolved along different paths than that of other advanced species, focusing on the manipulation of physical forces and dimensional space rather than psychic phenomena. Their weapons channel dark energy and exotic matter rather than the psychic forces employed by craftworld Eldar, while their vehicles and aircraft rely on anti-gravitational fields and dimensional manipulation rather than psychic levitation or warp-based propulsion systems. The dimensional pocket stability depends on a complex network of generators and stabilizers that draw their power from the suffering of captives and the controlled collapse of micro-dimensions. These systems require constant maintenance and feeding, creating a technological infrastructure that is both incredibly sophisticated and utterly dependent on the continuation of the Dark Eldar's predatory lifestyle. The failure of even a small section of this network could result in the collapse of entire districts, sending them tumbling into the dimensional void that surrounds Commorragh. The city's expansion continues even in the current era, with new sections being carved from the Webway's substance and added to the existing structure. This growth is not random, but follows patterns established by the ruling kabals and their ongoing territorial disputes. New districts are often built as statements of power and wealth, their architecture designed to overshadow and intimidate rival factions. The construction process itself involves the sacrifice of thousands of slaves, their life force used to bind the new sections to the existing city and ensure their stability within the dimensional pocket. Transportation within Commorragh relies on a network of portal systems and dimensional shortcuts that allow rapid movement between distant districts. These portals are carefully controlled by the various factions that rule different areas of the city, with access serving as both a form of currency and a means of maintaining political control. The portal network also connects Commorragh to the broader Webway, allowing Dark Eldar raiding parties to emerge anywhere in the galaxy where the ancient tunnel system remains intact. The transformation of Commorragh from a collection of minor wastation, ports into the sprawling dimensional metropolis that dominates the Webway today began millennia before the cataclysmic birth of Slaanesh tore the heart from the Aeldari Empire. What had once served as convenient stopping points for merchant vessels and diplomatic envoys gradually evolved into something far more sinister as the Aeldari civilization descended into the hedonistic excess that would ultimately doom their species. These port cities, strategically positioned at crucial junctions within the Webway's labyrinthine network, began attracting those elements of Aeldari society who sought to push the boundaries of sensation and experience beyond what even their increasingly debauched homeworlds would tolerate. The inhabitants of these Webway ports developed a culture distinct from their cousins in real space, one that embraced the pursuit of ever more extreme experiences while maintaining the sophisticated veneer that characterized all Aeldari endeavors. Unlike the gradual descent into decadence that marked the Empire's core worlds, the port cities fostered an environment where the most extreme practitioners of various arts could gather without the social constraints that still nominally existed elsewhere. Here, pain sculptors could practice their craft without interference, flesh artists could experiment with living subjects drawn from the constant stream of travelers, and those who sought to explore the darker aspects of Aeldari psychology could do so without judgment from their peers. The architecture of these early settlements reflected their inhabitants' growing obsession with sensation and control. Buildings were constructed with materials that responded to emotional states, walls that could conduct pain or pleasure directly into the nervous systems of those who touched them, and chambers designed to amplify specific psychological responses. The technology employed went beyond mere luxury or convenience, incorporating systems that could manipulate the biochemistry of inhabitants and visitors alike, ensuring that every experience within the port cities was heightened to levels that would have been considered excessive even by the standards of the decaying empire. As the psychic pressure that would eventually birth Slaanesh began building within the warp, those Aeldari who possessed sufficient foresight or paranoia recognized the approaching catastrophe. The inhabitants of the Webway ports found themselves in a unique position to observe the growing corruption, as their dimensional isolation provided them with a perspective unavailable to those trapped within the Empire's core territories. They witnessed the increasing frequency of possession incidents, the spontaneous manifestation of demonic entities, and the gradual weakening of the barriers between real space and the warp that preceded the fall. The response of the port dwellers to these warning signs differed markedly from the approaches taken by other Aeldari factions. While some groups began the construction of the massive craft worlds that would carry survivors beyond the reach of the coming catastrophe, and others delved deeper into the study of their species' psychic heritage in an attempt to understand and combat the growing threat, the inhabitants of the Webway ports chose a third path. They began systematically severing their connections to the broader Aeldari civilization, cutting the dimensional links that bound their settlements to the Empire's infrastructure, and redirecting the flow of Webway traffic to bypass their territories entirely. This process of deliberate isolation required unprecedented cooperation between the various port cities, as the Webway's interconnected nature meant that changes to one section could have cascading effects throughout the entire network. The port dwellers developed new technologies specifically designed to manipulate the Webway structure, creating dimensional barriers and redirecting passages to ensure their settlements would remain hidden from both their own species and any entities that might emerge from the coming catastrophe. These modifications to the Webway itself represented some of the most sophisticated dimensional engineering ever attempted by the Aeldari, requiring the sacrifice of entire populations to provide the psychic energy necessary to reshape reality on such a massive scale. The actual moment of Slaanesh's birth struck the Aeldari Empire like a psychic tsunami, instantly consuming the souls of billions and transforming the core worlds into the Eye of Terror. The port cities, protected by their dimensional barriers and isolated from the main flow of the Webway, survived the initial catastrophe largely intact. However, the survivors quickly discovered that their isolation came with a terrible price. The same barriers that protected them from She Who Thirsts also cut them off from the natural flow of psychic energy that sustained all Aeldari, leaving them slowly dying as their souls were gradually consumed by the very entity they had sought to escape. The solution to this existential crisis came through experimentation with captured survivors from the Fall, refugees who had fled into the Webway seeking shelter from the newborn chaos god. The port dwellers discovered that the suffering and death of other beings could provide the psychic sustenance they required, temporarily staving off the soul hunger that threatened to consume them. This discovery fundamentally altered their society, transforming them from sophisticated hedonists into predatory parasites who viewed all other life as potential sources of sustenance. The rejection of traditional Aeldari spiritual practices followed naturally from this transformation. The infinity circuits that had once provided a form of immortality for their species required a connection to the broader psychic network that the port dwellers had deliberately severed. Similarly, the path system that guided craftworld Aeldari through their long lives became meaningless to beings who had embraced an existence based entirely on the consumption of others' suffering. The emerging Drukhari culture actively rejected these concepts, viewing them as weaknesses that had contributed to the Empire's downfall. Instead of the structured spiritual development that characterized craftworld society, the Drukhari embraced a philosophy of absolute self-interest and the pursuit of sensation at any cost. They developed new technologies that could extract and concentrate the psychic energy released by suffering, creating an entire infrastructure based on the systematic torture and exploitation of other beings. The ancient port cities were expanded and modified to accommodate this new purpose, with vast holding areas for captives, processing facilities for extracting psychic energy, and distribution networks to ensure that the harvested suffering reached every corner of their growing domain. The early centuries following the fall saw constant warfare between the various port cities as their inhabitants struggled to establish dominance over the emerging Drukhari civilization. These conflicts differed significantly from the ritualized combat that had characterized pre-fall Aeldari warfare, incorporating levels of cruelty and brutality that reflected the participants' complete abandonment of their species' traditional moral constraints. Victory in these wars was measured not merely in territory gained or enemies defeated, but in the quantity and quality of suffering that could be extracted from the conquered populations. The most successful leaders during this period were those who could combine military prowess with an understanding of the new technologies of pain extraction and psychic sustenance. They established the first kabals, hierarchical organizations that provided structure to Drukhari society, while ensuring that power remained concentrated in the hands of those most capable of providing the suffering that sustained their followers. These early kabals were smaller and more fluid than their modern counterparts, with membership changing frequently as ambitious individuals sought to align themselves with the most successful leaders. The consolidation of the scattered port cities into the unified realm of Commorragh required the development of new forms of dimensional engineering that could merge separate pocket dimensions into a single coherent space. This process involved the deliberate collapse of several smaller settlements, their inhabitants sacrificed to provide the energy necessary to bind the surviving cities together. The resulting dimensional pocket was larger and more stable than any of its component parts, capable of supporting a much larger population while maintaining the isolation that protected its inhabitants from Slaanesh. The hierarchical structure that emerged from these early power struggles established patterns that continue to influence Drukhari society in the current era. The most powerful kabals claimed the largest and most strategically important districts of the newly unified Commorragh, while smaller organizations were relegated to the peripheral areas or forced to exist as clients of their more successful rivals. This distribution of territory created a complex web of alliances and rivalries that provided the foundation for the political system that governs the Dark City today. The rejection of craftworld philosophy extended beyond mere spiritual practices to encompass the entire worldview that had guided Aeldari civilization for millennia. Where the craftworld sought to preserve the best aspects of their species' heritage while avoiding the mistakes that had led to the fall, the Drukhari embraced those very mistakes as sources of strength. They viewed compassion as weakness, cooperation as vulnerability, and the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake as a dangerous distraction from the practical business of survival through predation. This philosophical transformation was reflected in every aspect of Drukhari culture, from their art and architecture to their technology and social organization. Beauty became synonymous with cruelty, with the most admired works being those that could inflict the greatest suffering while maintaining aesthetic sophistication. Scientific research focused almost exclusively on the development of new methods for extracting and utilizing psychic energy from unwilling subjects, while social advancement depended entirely on an individual's ability to provide suffering for their superiors while extracting it from their subordinates. The early Drukhari also developed a complex relationship with the broader Webway network that surrounded their domain. While they maintained their isolation from the main passages to avoid detection by surviving Aeldari factions, they began creating new tunnels and connections that would allow them to launch raids into real space without exposing their home territory to retaliation. These new passages were carefully concealed and heavily defended, with multiple fallback positions and dead-end branches designed to confuse and trap any forces that might attempt to follow raiding parties back to their source. The establishment of these raiding corridors marked the beginning of the Drukhari's transformation from a purely defensive civilization focused on survival into an aggressively expansionist culture that viewed the entire galaxy as a hunting ground. The success of early raids provided both the psychic sustenance necessary for continued survival and the resources needed to expand and improve their dimensional stronghold. More importantly, these raids demonstrated that the Drukhari could not only survive in their artificial environment, but could actively thrive by exploiting the weaknesses of other species. The dimensional expanse of Commorragh stretches across multiple layers of reality, each district and subrealm carefully crafted to serve specific functions within the Dark City's ecosystem of suffering. The vertical stratification of these domains reflects both the rigid hierarchy of Drukhari society and the practical necessities of maintaining a civilization built entirely upon the extraction of psychic energy from unwilling subjects. Unlike conventional cities that expand horizontally across planetary surfaces, Commorragh grows in all directions simultaneously, with new sections carved from the Webway's substance and positioned according to the political influence and territorial ambitions of their creators. High Commorragh occupies the uppermost reaches of the dimensional pocket, where the captured suns burn brightest and cast their sickly illumination across spires of impossible height and architectural complexity. These towering structures serve as the primary residences and fortress palaces of the most powerful archons, their crystalline surfaces reflecting and refracting light in patterns that shift according to the emotional states of their inhabitants. The spires themselves are constructed from materials that exist only within the Webway's dimensional boundaries, living metals that respond to psychic stimuli, stones quarried from collapsed pocket dimensions, and crystallized fragments of compressed space-time that hum with barely contained energy. The palaces of High Commorragh incorporate defensive systems that operate on principles fundamentally different from conventional fortifications. Rather than relying solely on physical barriers, these structures employ dimensional phasing technology that can shift entire sections of a building out of phase with local reality, rendering them temporarily untouchable by conventional weapons. The walls themselves are embedded with pain-conducting networks that can channel agony directly into the nervous systems of intruders, while the floors and ceilings incorporate gravity manipulation systems that can disorient attackers by suddenly reversing or eliminating gravitational fields within specific chambers. The architectural aesthetics of High Commorragh reflect the refined cruelty that characterizes the upper echelons of Drukhari society. Doorways are carved to resemble screaming faces, their expressions shifting subtly as observers pass through them. Windows are fashioned from transparent materials that show different views depending on the psychological state of the viewer, sometimes displaying scenes of past victories and conquests, other times revealing the observer's deepest fears made manifest. Gardens within these elevated districts feature plants bred specifically for their ability to inflict pain, their thorns coated with neurotoxins that cause exquisite agony without permanent damage, ensuring that victims remain conscious and capable of suffering for extended periods. The Nexus of Shadows occupies the middle tiers of Commorragh's vertical hierarchy, serving as the primary commercial and administrative center of the Dark City. Here, the various cabals maintain their headquarters and recruiting centers, while haemonculous covens operate their flesh laboratories and body modification workshops. The architecture in this region is more functional than the ornate displays of High Commorragh, but no less sinister in its design and purpose. Buildings are constructed with multiple levels of reality anchoring, ensuring that they remain stable even when the dimensional pocket experiences the fluctuations caused by major raids or territorial conflicts between rival factions. The slave markets of the Nexus of Shadows represent some of the most economically important facilities within Commorragh, serving as distribution centers for the constant influx of captives brought back from raids across the galaxy. These markets are designed with sophisticated containment systems that can accommodate beings from thousands of different species, each with their own physiological requirements and security considerations. The holding pens are equipped with atmospheric processors that can maintain the environmental conditions necessary to keep exotic captives alive, while neural inhibitor fields prevent psychically active species from using their abilities to escape or communicate with potential rescuers. The auction platforms within these markets incorporate advanced scanning technology that can analyze the psychic potential of individual captives, determining their value as sources of suffering and their suitability for various forms of exploitation. The most valuable specimens, those capable of experiencing particularly intense forms of psychological or physical torment, are reserved for private sales to the highest-ranking archons and haemonculi. Lesser captives are sold in bulk to the operators of the various entertainment facilities and processing centers that require steady supplies of expendable subjects. Transportation networks within the Nexus of Shadows rely on a combination of anti-gravity platforms and dimensional translocation systems that can move large quantities of cargo and personnel between different districts without the delays that would be caused by conventional transit methods. These systems are heavily monitored and controlled by the ruling cabals, with access serving as both a form of currency and a means of maintaining political leverage over smaller organizations. The translocation networks also incorporate security features that can instantly transport unauthorized users to holding cells or disposal facilities, ensuring that the transportation infrastructure cannot be used by escaped slaves or rival factions. The lower darkness extends downward from the main body of Commorragh into the deepest reaches of the dimensional pocket, where the light of the captured suns barely penetrates and the architecture becomes increasingly nightmarish in its configuration. These depths serve as the primary industrial centers of the Dark City, housing the massive processing facilities that convert captured victims into the various forms of psychic energy that sustain Drukhari civilization. The atmospheric conditions in the lower darkness are deliberately maintained at levels that cause discomfort to most species, with toxic gases, extreme temperatures, and pressure variations that serve to weaken the resistance of captives while providing environmental advantages to the Drukhari overseers. The slave pits of the lower darkness stretch for kilometers in all directions, their walls lined with containment cells that can accommodate millions of captives simultaneously. These facilities are designed with maximum efficiency in mind, incorporating automated systems that can sort incoming prisoners according to species, physical condition, and estimated psychic potential. The cells themselves are equipped with life support systems that maintain captives at the minimum level of health necessary to ensure their continued suffering, while neural stimulation devices can trigger specific pain responses on command or according to predetermined schedules. The processing centers adjacent to the slave pits employ technology that borders on the incomprehensible, utilizing devices that can extract and concentrate the psychic energy released by suffering while keeping the source alive for repeated harvesting. These machines incorporate elements of both advanced science and dimensional manipulation, creating fields that can amplify emotional responses while simultaneously siphoning off the psychic energy they generate. The extraction process itself is calibrated to maximize the quantity and quality of energy harvested, with different settings for various species and individual subjects based on their unique physiological and psychological characteristics. The torture amphitheaters scattered throughout Commorragh serve dual purposes as both entertainment venues and psychic energy generation facilities. These structures are designed with acoustic properties that amplify the sounds of suffering, ensuring that the screams and pleas of victims can be heard clearly by audiences positioned throughout the facility. The amphitheaters incorporate seating arrangements that allow spectators to experience vicarious pleasure from the torment being inflicted, while collection systems harvest the psychic energy generated by both the victim's agony and the audience's sadistic enjoyment. The gladiatorial arenas represent a more sophisticated form of entertainment that combines combat with systematic torture, creating spectacles that can sustain audience interest for extended periods while generating substantial quantities of psychic energy. These facilities feature adjustable terrain systems that can create different combat environments on demand, from simple flat surfaces to complex three-dimensional obstacle courses that incorporate various forms of environmental hazards. The combatants themselves are typically slaves who have been promised freedom in exchange for victory, though the conditions for earning release are invariably impossible to achieve. The arena floors are equipped with devices that can inflict additional suffering on combatants during fights, including neural shock projectors that cause paralysis or disorientation at dramatically appropriate moments, and pain amplifiers that increase the agony experienced from wounds without affecting the actual physical damage. These systems are controlled by arena operators who can manipulate the course of combat to maximize dramatic tension and audience engagement, ensuring that each contest provides optimal entertainment value and energy generation. The bone middens occupy vast sections of the lower darkness, serving as both disposal sites for the remains of consumed victims and grotesque monuments to the Dark City's predatory nature. These areas are carefully maintained by specialized rack servants who arrange the skeletal remains according to aesthetic principles that reflect Drukhari artistic sensibilities. The bones are treated with preservative chemicals that prevent decay while enhancing their visual impact, creating displays that can stretch for kilometers in complex geometric patterns that shift and change according to the whims of their curators. The corpse gardens represent a more sophisticated form of death art, where the preserved remains of particularly notable victims are arranged in elaborate displays that tell stories of conquest and domination. These installations incorporate advanced preservation technology that can maintain organic materials in states of apparent life, creating tableaus where the deceased appear to be frozen in moments of extreme agony or terror. The gardens are popular destinations for Drukhari seeking inspiration for their own artistic endeavors, while also serving as reminders of the fate that awaits those who oppose the Dark City's inhabitants. The hidden pleasure districts of Commorragh exist in carefully concealed sections of the dimensional pocket, accessible only to those who possess the appropriate access codes and political connections. These areas house the most elaborate and sophisticated torture facilities in the Dark City, where pain and suffering are elevated to the level of high art through the application of techniques developed over millennia of experimentation. The architecture in these districts is designed to enhance the psychological impact of the activities conducted within, incorporating elements that can manipulate the perceptions and emotional responses of both victims and observers. The pain gardens within these pleasure districts feature living sculptures created from the bodies of captives who have been modified through advanced biotechnology to serve as permanent fixtures in elaborate artistic displays. These unfortunate beings are kept alive through sophisticated life support systems, while their bodies are gradually transformed into components of larger artistic works, their suffering providing both aesthetic value and psychic sustenance for the garden's visitors. The transformation process can take decades to complete, with each stage carefully planned and executed to maximize both the artistic impact and the quantity of psychic energy generated. The most exclusive facilities within the pleasure districts are reserved for the personal use of the highest-ranking archons and their favored associates, featuring custom-designed torture chambers that incorporate the latest advances in pain infliction technology and psychological manipulation techniques. These chambers can be reconfigured on demand to accommodate different forms of torment, with environmental controls that can simulate various atmospheric conditions, gravity levels, and sensory inputs to enhance the suffering of their occupants. The technology employed in these facilities represents the pinnacle of Drukhari scientific achievement, combining millennia of accumulated knowledge with resources that would be impossible to obtain through conventional means. The political structure of Commorragh rests upon the foundation of the kabals, aristocratic houses that have evolved from the original port city ruling families into sophisticated organizations dedicated to the systematic exploitation of suffering. These hierarchical entities function as both military forces and commercial enterprises, their power measured not merely in territory controlled or warriors commanded, but in their capacity to generate and harvest the psychic energy that sustains all life within the Dark City. Each cabal operates as a semi-autonomous state within the broader framework of Commorragh's dimensional expanse, maintaining its own territories, military forces, and economic interests while engaging in the constant political maneuvering that defines inter-factional relationships throughout the realm. The internal structure of a typical cabal reflects the rigid caste system that governs all aspects of Drukhari society, with clear distinctions between the noble-born trueborn, who occupy positions of authority, and the lesser-born individuals who serve in various capacities throughout the organization. At the apex of each cabal stands the Archon, a figure whose authority derives from a combination of inherited bloodline superiority, demonstrated military prowess, and the political acumen necessary to maintain power in an environment where assassination and betrayal are accepted methods of advancement. The position of Archon is not merely ceremonial, but requires active participation in the planning and execution of raids, the management of territorial disputes, and the delicate negotiations that determine relationships with other cabals and factions within Commorragh. The Archon's immediate subordinates consist of Drakons, high-ranking nobles who serve as field commanders, territorial administrators, and diplomatic representatives depending on their individual specializations and the current needs of their cabal. These positions are typically filled by true-born individuals whose bloodlines can be traced back to the original port city aristocracy, though exceptional performance in combat or particularly successful raids can occasionally elevate lesser-born Drukhari to these ranks. The competition for Drakon positions is intense and frequently lethal, with candidates expected to demonstrate their worthiness through elaborate schemes that showcase their ability to inflict suffering while advancing their cabal's interests. The territories controlled by individual cabals vary dramatically in size and strategic importance, reflecting both historical circumstances and the ongoing results of territorial conflicts that have shaped Commorragh's political landscape for millennia. The most powerful cabals maintain vast districts that can span multiple dimensional layers, incorporating everything from the slave markets and processing facilities that generate their wealth to the fortress palaces that serve as symbols of their authority. These territories are defended by sophisticated security systems that combine advanced technology with strategic positioning, creating defensive networks that can repel attacks while providing platforms for launching retaliatory strikes against rival factions. The territorial boundaries between cabals are rarely static, shifting constantly as the result of successful raids, political alliances, and the outcomes of the various conflicts that erupt throughout Commorragh with predictable regularity. The acquisition of new territory requires not only military success, but also the administrative capacity to integrate conquered areas into existing power structures, while maintaining the delicate balance of fear and reward that keeps subordinates loyal. The most successful archons are those who can expand their domains while simultaneously strengthening their internal organization, ensuring that growth does not create vulnerabilities that can be exploited by rivals seeking opportunities for advancement. The spheres of influence maintained by major cabals extend far beyond their direct territorial holdings, encompassing networks of client organizations, commercial partnerships, and political alliances that can span the entire dimensional expanse of the Dark City. These influence networks are maintained through a combination of mutual benefit and carefully calibrated intimidation, with powerful cabals providing protection and resources to smaller organizations in exchange for loyalty, intelligence, and access to specialized services. The management of these relationships requires constant attention and periodic displays of strength to ensure that client organizations remain appropriately subordinate while continuing to provide value to their patrons. The economic foundations of cabal power rest primarily on their ability to organize and execute successful raids into real space, capturing the slaves and resources necessary to sustain their operations while generating the psychic energy that serves as the primary currency within Commorragh's twisted economy. The planning and execution of these raids requires sophisticated intelligence networks that can identify suitable targets, assess defensive capabilities, and coordinate the complex logistics necessary to transport raiding forces through the Webway to their destinations. The most successful cabals maintain permanent intelligence operations throughout the galaxy, using networks of spies, informants, and monitoring stations to track potential targets and identify opportunities for profitable raids. The constant political maneuvering that characterizes inter-cabal relationships operates on multiple levels simultaneously, from the grand strategic alliances that can reshape the balance of power throughout Commorragh to the petty personal vendettas that drive individual acts of assassination and sabotage. The political system lacks any central authority capable of enforcing agreements or mediating disputes, creating an environment where strength and cunning are the only reliable guarantees of survival. Alliances between cabals are typically temporary arrangements based on mutual advantage rather than genuine trust, with participants constantly evaluating whether their partners remain useful or have become potential targets for elimination. The assassination of rival archons and their key subordinates represents one of the most common forms of political expression within Commorragh, with successful killings serving multiple purposes simultaneously. The elimination of a rival removes a potential threat while demonstrating the assassin's capabilities to other potential enemies, creating opportunities for territorial expansion while sending clear messages about the consequences of opposition. The methods employed in these assassinations range from direct military assaults to elaborate schemes involving poison, dimensional manipulation, and psychological warfare, with the most admired killings being those that combine effectiveness with artistic sophistication. The role of Trueborn within cabal hierarchies extends beyond mere administrative convenience to encompass fundamental beliefs about genetic superiority and the preservation of bloodline purity that have become central to Drukhari identity. The Trueborn are considered inherently superior to other Drukhari, not merely because of their ancestry, but because their genetic heritage provides them with capabilities and insights that lesser-born individuals cannot match. This belief system is reinforced through selective breeding programs that maintain and enhance desirable traits while eliminating genetic lines deemed inferior or contaminated by association with non-Drukhari species. The maintenance of bloodline purity requires constant vigilance and the systematic exclusion of individuals whose ancestry cannot be verified through genealogical records that extend back to the pre-fall era. The verification process itself has become a specialized field within Drukhari society, with expert genealogists maintaining vast databases of bloodline information while developing increasingly sophisticated methods for detecting genetic contamination or fraudulent claims of noble birth. The penalties for attempting to falsify noble ancestry are severe and typically involve forms of punishment that serve as public examples of the consequences of challenging the established social order. The rigid caste system that governs cabal organization creates creates clear hierarchies that determine not only individual advancement opportunities, but also access to resources, information, and the various privileges that accompany high social status. The system is designed to prevent social mobility while ensuring that those in positions of authority possess the genetic and cultural advantages necessary to maintain their dominance over lesser-born subordinates. The few exceptions to this rigid structure typically involve individuals who demonstrate exceptional capabilities in areas that directly benefit their superiors, though even these cases rarely result in true equality with trueborn nobles. The Cabal of the Black Heart stands as the most powerful and influential organization within Commorragh, controlling vast territories that span multiple districts while maintaining military forces that dwarf those of most rival factions. Under the leadership of Archon Asdrubal Vecht, the Cabal has achieved a level of dominance that allows it to influence the political direction of the entire Dark City, while pursuing ambitious expansion projects that extend its reach throughout the Webway network. The organization's power derives from a combination of military excellence, economic dominance, and the political acumen of its leadership, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of success that has maintained its position at the apex of Commorragh's hierarchy for millennia. The territorial holdings of the Cabal of the Black Heart include some of the most strategically important locations within Commorragh, from the primary slave markets that serve as distribution centers for captured victims to the dimensional gateways that control access to key Webway passages. This territorial dominance provides the Cabal with economic advantages that extend far beyond direct revenue generation, allowing it to influence the activities of other organizations through its control over essential infrastructure and resources. The Cabal's ability to grant or deny access to these facilities serves as a powerful tool for maintaining political control while generating the wealth necessary to support its extensive military and intelligence operations. The military forces of the Cabal of the Black Heart are organized along lines that reflect both traditional Drukhari tactical doctrine and innovations developed through centuries of successful raiding operations. The Cabal maintains multiple specialized units designed for different types of operations, from the fast attack forces that excel at hit and run raids to the heavy assault units capable of breaching fortified positions and engaging enemy forces in sustained combat. The integration of these different unit types allows the Cabal to adapt its tactical approach to the specific requirements of individual operations, while maintaining the flexibility necessary to respond to unexpected developments during raids or territorial conflicts. The Cabal of the Flayed Skull has earned its reputation through a combination of exceptional raiding prowess and a particular expertise in aerial combat that sets it apart from other major organizations within Commorragh. The Cabal's pilots are considered among the finest in the Dark City, capable of executing complex maneuvers in the confined spaces of the Webway, while engaging multiple targets simultaneously during high-speed raids. This aerial expertise has allowed the Cabal to specialize in operations that other organizations would consider too dangerous or technically challenging, creating opportunities for capturing high-value targets and exotic resources that command premium prices in Commorragh's markets. The territorial holdings of the Cabal of the Flayed Skull reflect its specialization in aerial operations, with extensive facilities dedicated to the maintenance and modification of aircraft and the training of pilots in advanced combat techniques. These facilities incorporate some of the most sophisticated flight simulation technology available within Commorragh, allowing pilots to practice complex maneuvers and combat scenarios without risking valuable aircraft or experienced personnel. The Cabal's investment in these training facilities has created a competitive advantage that extends beyond mere technical proficiency to encompass the tactical innovation and strategic thinking necessary for successful raiding operations. The recruitment practices employed by the Cabal of the Flayed Skull emphasize the identification and development of individuals who possess the reflexes, spatial awareness, and psychological characteristics necessary for success in aerial combat. The selection process involves extensive testing that evaluates not only flying ability, but also the capacity for the kind of calculated cruelty that characterizes all Drukhari military operations. Successful candidates undergo years of training that combines technical instruction with psychological conditioning designed to enhance their effectiveness as raiders while ensuring their loyalty to the Cabal's leadership. The distinctive characteristics that define individual Cabals extend beyond mere tactical specializations to encompass cultural practices, aesthetic preferences, and philosophical approaches that reflect the diverse origins and evolutionary paths of these organizations. These differences are expressed through everything from architectural styles and uniform designs to the specific methods employed in torture and the extraction of psychic energy from captives. The development and maintenance of these distinctive characteristics serves multiple purposes, from creating organizational identity and fostering unit cohesion to establishing reputations that can provide tactical advantages during raids and political negotiations. The competition between major Cabals for dominance within specific sectors of Commorragh's economy and political structure creates a dynamic environment where innovation and adaptation are essential for survival. Organizations that fail to evolve in response to changing circumstances or emerging opportunities quickly find themselves marginalized by more successful rivals, while those that can anticipate and exploit new developments can achieve rapid advancement in the complex hierarchy that governs the Dark City. This competitive pressure ensures that the major Cabals continue to refine their capabilities and expand their operations, driving the overall growth and development of Drukhari civilization while maintaining the predatory focus that defines their relationship with the broader galaxy. The rise of Asdrubal vect from the low-born dregs of Commorragh's undercity to the position of supreme overlord represents perhaps the most audacious and successful political campaign in the Dark City's blood-soaked history. Born into the lowest caste of Drukhari society, Vect possessed neither the noble bloodline that traditionally guaranteed advancement nor the inherited wealth that could purchase influence within the established power structures. What he did possess, however, was an intellect capable of perceiving patterns and opportunities that escaped even the most experienced archons, combined with a ruthlessness that surpassed even the brutal standards of his species. Vect's early years were spent in the shadow districts of Lower Commorragh, where the dregs of society competed for scraps of psychic energy and the occasional opportunity to participate in minor raids as expendable cannon fodder. The hierarchical nature of Drukhari society meant that advancement through conventional means was virtually impossible for someone of his birth, as the trueborn nobility maintained strict control over all positions of authority within the established Cabals. The few low-born individuals who managed to achieve any measure of success typically did so by accepting permanent subordination to noble patrons, serving as skilled specialists or particularly effective enforcers while never challenging the fundamental structure of the caste system. The young Vect distinguished himself from his peers through his ability to identify and exploit the weaknesses inherent in Commorragh's political system, recognizing that the rigid hierarchies that prevented his advancement also created blind spots and vulnerabilities that could be turned to his advantage. While other lowborn Drukhari focused their ambitions on achieving minor improvements in their circumstances, Vect began developing plans that would ultimately reshape the entire structure of the Dark City's government. His early schemes involved the manipulation of minor territorial disputes between rival gangs, using information and strategic betrayals to eliminate potential competitors, while positioning himself as an indispensable asset to more powerful patrons. The formation of Vect's own power base began with the systematic recruitment of other lowborn individuals who possessed specialized skills or access to resources that could contribute to his growing network of influence. Unlike the traditional Cabal structure that relied on bloodline loyalty and inherited obligation, Vect's organization was built around mutual benefit and shared ambition, creating bonds that were often stronger than the aristocratic connections that governed established factions. His followers were selected not for their ancestry, but for their capabilities and their willingness to embrace the kind of calculated brutality that would be necessary to challenge the existing order. The early operations conducted by Vec's nascent organization focused on intelligence gathering and the systematic mapping of relationships between the various established cabals, identifying potential weaknesses and opportunities for exploitation. These activities required unprecedented levels of subtlety and patience, as any premature exposure of his ambitions would have resulted in swift elimination by the threatened nobility. Vec's network gradually extended throughout the lower levels of Commorragh's hierarchy, incorporating individuals who served in various capacities within the established cabals while maintaining their primary loyalty to his organization. The first major demonstration of Vec's strategic capabilities came through his manipulation of a territorial dispute between two minor cabals, using carefully placed agents and strategically timed betrayals to ensure that both organizations destroyed each other in a prolonged conflict. The resources and territory left vacant by this mutual destruction were quietly absorbed by Vec's followers, providing his organization with its first significant power base, while demonstrating to potential allies and enemies alike that he possessed the capability to orchestrate complex schemes with devastating effectiveness. The transformation of Vec's criminal network into a legitimate cabal required the adoption of many traditional organizational structures while maintaining the innovative approaches that had enabled his initial success. The newly formed cabal of the Black Heart incorporated elements of conventional Drukhari military doctrine while developing new tactical approaches that reflected the diverse backgrounds and specialized skills of its membership. The organization's emphasis on merit-based advancement and operational effectiveness created a level of unit cohesion and tactical flexibility that often surprised opponents accustomed to the more predictable patterns of traditional noble-led forces. Vec's understanding of the broader political landscape within Commorragh enabled him to identify and exploit the growing tensions between established cabals, using his organization's unique position as an outsider faction to serve as a catalyst for conflicts that would ultimately benefit his long-term objectives. His agents began appearing in various capacities throughout the Dark City, serving as intermediaries in negotiations, providing specialized services to multiple factions simultaneously, and gradually building the network of obligations and dependencies that would later prove crucial to his ascension to supreme power. The imperial invasion of Commorragh during the 36th millennium provided Vec with the opportunity he had been preparing for throughout his centuries of careful planning and political maneuvering. The Space Marine strike force that penetrated the Dark City's defenses represented an unprecedented threat to the established order, one that exposed the weaknesses and limitations of the traditional cabal system while creating a crisis that demanded innovative solutions. While the established archons struggled to coordinate an effective response to the imperial assault, Vec recognized that the invasion could serve his purposes if properly manipulated. Rather than simply repelling the imperial forces, Vec orchestrated a campaign that used the Space Marine presence as a weapon against his political rivals, ensuring that the invaders encountered minimal resistance in certain areas, while directing them toward the strongholds of cabals that posed the greatest threat to his ambitions. The coordination required for this manipulation involved the activation of intelligence networks that had been built over centuries, with agents positioned throughout the Dark City, providing real-time information about imperial movements while subtly influencing the defensive responses of targeted cabals. The elimination of rival archons during the imperial invasion was accomplished through a combination of direct action and strategic misdirection, with Vec's forces either facilitating imperial attacks on enemy positions or taking advantage of the chaos to conduct their own assassination operations. The most sophisticated of these eliminations involved the deliberate compromise of defensive positions, ensuring that specific targets would be exposed to imperial assault while maintaining plausible deniability about the circumstances that led to their deaths. The systematic removal of key rivals during this period significantly reduced the number of potential challengers to Vec's growing authority, while demonstrating his ability to turn external threats into opportunities for internal advancement. The successful repulsion of the Imperial invasion, achieved largely through Vect's strategic coordination of previously fractured Drukhari forces, established his reputation as the most capable military leader within Commorragh, while simultaneously eliminating many of the established power structures that had previously constrained his ambitions. The kabals that had suffered the heaviest losses during the invasion found themselves unable to maintain their territorial holdings or political influence, creating opportunities for Vect's organization to expand its control over crucial areas of the Dark City. The redistribution of power that followed the invasion was carefully managed by Vect to ensure that his allies received the most valuable territories, while potential rivals were relegated to less strategically important areas. The consolidation of Vect's position as Supreme Overlord required the development of new governmental structures that could accommodate the diverse factions that had emerged from the post-invasion reorganization, while maintaining centralized control over the most important aspects of Commorragh's administration. The system that evolved under Vect's direction preserved many traditional elements of Cabal autonomy, while establishing clear hierarchies that ensured ultimate authority remained concentrated in his hands. The various archons who survived the transition were allowed to maintain their organizations and territories, but their activities became subject to oversight and regulation by Vect's expanding bureaucracy. The methods employed by Vect to maintain his supreme authority combined traditional Drukhari approaches to political control with innovative techniques developed specifically to address the unique challenges of governing a society built around competitive cruelty and systematic betrayal. The distribution of resources throughout Commorragh is carefully managed to ensure that no single cabal or faction can accumulate sufficient wealth and power to pose a serious challenge to the central authority, while the allocation of raiding opportunities and territorial assignments is used to reward loyalty and punish opposition. The complex web of dependencies and obligations that results from this system creates multiple layers of control that make organized resistance extremely difficult to achieve. The intelligence network that supports Vect's rule extends throughout every level of Commorragh's society, incorporating agents and informants who monitor the activities of potential rivals while providing early warning of developing threats to the established order. The sophistication of this surveillance system exceeds anything previously achieved within Drukhari society, utilizing advanced technology and psychological manipulation techniques to maintain awareness of political developments throughout the Dark City. The information gathered through these networks enables Vect to anticipate and counter potential challenges before they can develop into serious threats, while also providing the intelligence necessary to identify opportunities for expanding his influence into new areas. The elimination of threats to Vect's authority is accomplished through a variety of methods that range from direct assassination to complex schemes designed to discredit or neutralize opponents without creating martyrs or rallying points for resistance movements. The most effective of these operations involve the manipulation of existing rivalries and conflicts, using carefully placed provocations and strategic misinformation to ensure that potential challengers destroy each other rather than combining their efforts against the central authority. The timing and execution of these operations require precise coordination and extensive preparation, with contingency plans developed to address various possible outcomes and responses. The territorial reorganization that accompanied Vect's rise to power involved the systematic redistribution of districts and resources throughout Commorragh, with the most strategically important areas placed under direct control of the central authority, while lesser territories were allocated to various cabals based on their demonstrated loyalty and effectiveness. The new administrative structure created clear chains of command and responsibility while maintaining sufficient flexibility to accommodate the changing requirements of ongoing operations and political developments. The integration of previously independent territories into this unified system required extensive negotiation and occasional military action to overcome resistance from established power holders. The economic policies implemented under Vex rule focus on maximizing the efficiency of psychic energy extraction and distribution, while ensuring that the benefits of successful raiding operations are shared in ways that reinforce the political structure he has established. The centralized coordination of major raids enables more ambitious operations than were previously possible, with multiple kabals contributing specialized capabilities to achieve objectives that would be impossible for individual organizations to accomplish. The increased success rate and scale of these operations generates additional resources that can be used to reward cooperation and fund further expansion of Commorragh's capabilities. The cultural changes that have accompanied Vex's political transformation of Commorragh reflect his understanding that lasting power requires more than mere military dominance or economic control. The promotion of new artistic and philosophical movements that emphasize the superiority of achievement over inherited status has helped to legitimize his rule while creating alternative sources of prestige and advancement for individuals who lack noble bloodlines. The patronage of innovative torture techniques and architectural projects serves similar purposes, demonstrating the benefits of the new order while providing outlets for the creative energies of the Dark City's inhabitants. The expansion of Commorragh's influence throughout the Webway network has accelerated significantly under Vex's leadership, with new passages and dimensional pockets being incorporated into the Dark City's territory through a combination of military conquest and diplomatic negotiation. These expansion efforts are carefully coordinated to avoid conflicts with other major powers that utilize the Webway while maximizing the strategic advantages gained through territorial acquisition. The integration of new territories requires extensive modification of existing infrastructure and the establishment of new administrative systems to ensure effective control over the expanded domain. The gladiatorial traditions that define the witch cults of Commorragh represent a sophisticated evolution of the entertainment practices that emerged in the wake of the fall, transforming what had once been ritualized combat into an elaborate industry built around the systematic cultivation and harvesting of pain. These organizations operate as semi-independent entities within the Dark City's complex political structure, maintaining their own territories and hierarchies while serving the broader entertainment needs of Drukhari society. The witch cults have developed beyond simple fighting troops into comprehensive institutions that combine athletic training, artistic performance, and technological innovation to create spectacles that can sustain audience interest for extended periods while generating substantial quantities of psychic energy. The arenas that serve as the primary venues for witch cult performances are distributed throughout Commorragh's dimensional expanse, with each facility designed to accommodate specific types of combat and entertainment. The largest and most prestigious of these venues is the Great Arena, a massive amphitheater that can accommodate hundreds of thousands of spectators while providing multiple performance spaces for simultaneous events. The structure incorporates advanced gravitational manipulation technology that allows combat to take place on surfaces oriented in all directions, creating three-dimensional battlefields where fighters must master movement in multiple planes while engaging their opponents. The arena floor can be reconfigured in real time to create different terrain features, from simple flat surfaces to complex obstacle courses that incorporate moving platforms, energy barriers, and environmental hazards. The Crucible represents another major arena complex, specializing in contests that emphasize endurance and psychological torment over simple combat prowess. The facility features multiple chambers where different forms of competition can take place simultaneously, from traditional gladiatorial combat to elaborate torture contests where participants compete to inflict the most creative forms of suffering on provided victims. The Crucible's design incorporates sophisticated life support systems that can maintain combatants and victims in states of consciousness, even when subjected to injuries that would normally prove fatal, ensuring that contests can continue for extended periods while maximizing the psychic energy generated by prolonged suffering. The orbital sphere serves as the premier venue for aerial combat, featuring a spherical arena where fighters equipped with various forms of flight technology engage in three-dimensional battles that showcase both piloting skill and weapon mastery. The arena's interior incorporates a complex network of obstacles and hazards that can be repositioned during combat, creating dynamic environments that require constant adaptation and tactical innovation. The facility's gravitational systems can create zones of altered gravity or complete weightlessness, adding additional layers of complexity to aerial engagements while providing spectacular visual effects for the entertainment of spectators. The hierarchy within individual witch cults follows a meritocratic structure that differs significantly from the bloodline-based systems employed by the kabals, with advancement determined primarily by combat performance and the ability to generate audience enthusiasm. At the lowest level are the witches themselves, fighters who have demonstrated sufficient skill and showmanship to earn admission to a cult, but have not yet achieved the status necessary for independent operation. These individuals undergo intensive training regimens that combine physical conditioning with instruction in various combat techniques, weapon handling, and performance arts designed to maximize their entertainment value during arena contests. The training facilities operated by major witch cults incorporate some of the most advanced combat simulation technology available within Commorragh, utilizing holographic projectors and neural interface systems to create realistic training scenarios that can prepare fighters for the specific challenges they will face in different types of arena combat. These systems can simulate various environmental conditions, opponent behaviors, and equipment configurations, allowing witches to practice complex maneuvers and tactical combinations without the risks associated with live combat training. The most sophisticated facilities can even simulate the psychological effects of audience reaction, helping fighters develop the mental conditioning necessary to maintain focus and performance quality under the intense scrutiny of arena spectators. The progression from basic witch to more advanced positions within the cult hierarchy requires demonstration of capabilities that extend beyond simple combat effectiveness to encompass leadership potential, tactical innovation, and the ability to train and develop newer members. Haemonculi rank represents the first significant advancement opportunity, with these individuals serving as squad leaders and training supervisors while continuing to participate in arena combat. The selection process for haemonculi positions involves extensive evaluation of candidates' performance records, leadership capabilities, and potential for continued advancement within the organization. The Siren rank represents a more specialized position within witch cult hierarchies, typically reserved for individuals who have demonstrated exceptional skill in specific forms of combat or entertainment. Sirens often serve as featured performers in major arena events, their individual reputations drawing audiences and generating the kind of enthusiasm that translates into substantial psychic energy harvesting. The development of a siren's public persona involves careful cultivation of distinctive fighting styles, signature weapons, and performance characteristics that can be marketed to arena audiences while maintaining the element of unpredictability that keeps spectators engaged. The pinnacle of witch cult hierarchy is represented by the succubi, individuals who have achieved such levels of skill and reputation that they can command their own followings while influencing the direction of their organization's activities. The ascension to succubus rank typically requires not only exceptional combat ability, but also the political acumen necessary to navigate the complex relationships between different witch cults and their various patrons within the broader Drukhari power structure. Succubi often maintain personal retinues of favored fighters, while serving as the primary interface between their cults and the kabals or other organizations that sponsor arena events. The combat styles employed by different witch cults reflect both practical considerations related to arena effectiveness and aesthetic preferences that help distinguish individual organizations from their competitors. The Cult of Strife has developed a reputation for lightning-fast assault techniques that emphasize speed and precision over brute force, with their fighters trained to exploit brief openings in enemy defenses while maintaining constant movement to avoid retaliation. Their signature weapons include various forms of bladed implements designed for rapid strikes and defensive parrying, often incorporating monomolecular edges that can slice through most forms of armor with minimal resistance. The training regimens employed by the Cult of Strife focus heavily on reaction time development and spatial awareness, with fighters spending extensive periods practicing combat techniques in environments designed to test their ability to respond instantly to changing tactical situations. The cult's facilities incorporate moving obstacles, randomized attack patterns, and sensory disruption systems that force trainees to rely on instinct and muscle memory rather than conscious tactical analysis. The resulting fighting style emphasizes fluid movement and adaptive responses that can be adjusted in real time based on opponent behavior and environmental conditions. The Cult of the Cursed Blade has specialized in the use of exotic weapons that incorporate various forms of toxins, neural disruptors, and pain amplification technology, creating combat styles that emphasize the infliction of suffering over simple elimination of opponents. Their fighters are trained in the precise application of various chemical and technological agents that can incapacitate enemies while keeping them conscious and capable of experiencing prolonged agony. The cult's weapon masters have developed an extensive catalog of different toxins and technological effects, each designed to produce specific types of suffering that can be tailored to particular arena events or audience preferences. The Red Grief has earned recognition for their mastery of acrobatic combat techniques that incorporate elements of dance and artistic performance into their fighting styles. Their training emphasizes flexibility, balance, and the ability to execute complex maneuvers that serve both tactical and aesthetic purposes during arena combat. The cult's fighters are expected to maintain high levels of physical conditioning while developing the artistic sensibilities necessary to create visually striking performances that can captivate audiences even during periods of reduced combat intensity. The weapon specializations that define different witch cult traditions extend far beyond conventional bladed implements to encompass a wide variety of exotic tools designed specifically for arena combat and entertainment purposes. The Hydra gauntlets favored by some cults incorporate multiple retractable blades that can be deployed in various configurations, allowing fighters to adapt their weapon characteristics to different tactical situations while maintaining the element of surprise that keeps opponents off balance. The neural disruptors employed by other organizations can incapacitate enemies through direct nervous system interference, creating spectacular visual effects while ensuring that victims remain conscious throughout their suffering. The razor flails used by certain witch cults represent sophisticated weapons that combine traditional flail mechanics with monomolecular cutting edges and neural feedback systems that allow wielders to control the weapon's movement with unprecedented precision. The mastery of these weapons requires years of training to develop the hand-eye coordination and spatial awareness necessary to effectively employ them in close combat while avoiding self-injury. The most skilled practitioners can manipulate multiple razor flails simultaneously, creating defensive barriers while maintaining offensive capabilities against multiple opponents. The relationship between witch cults and the cabals that dominate Commorragh's political structure operates on multiple levels, encompassing everything from direct financial sponsorship to complex political alliances that can influence the outcomes of territorial disputes and succession struggles. The major cabals maintain extensive entertainment budgets that fund arena events, sponsor individual fighters, and support the development of new combat techniques and performance arts. This sponsorship provides witch cults with the resources necessary to maintain their training facilities and equipment, while ensuring that arena events continue to provide the entertainment and psychic energy generation that serves broader societal needs. The Cabal of the Black Heart maintains particularly extensive relationships with multiple witch cults, using its economic dominance to secure exclusive performance contracts and priority access to the most skilled fighters for private events. The organization's sponsorship activities extend beyond simple financial support to encompass the provision of advanced weapons and equipment, access to exotic training environments, and opportunities for cult members to participate in raiding operations that can provide valuable combat experience while generating additional revenue. The political influence that accompanies this level of support allows sponsored cults to secure preferential treatment in arena scheduling and access to the most prestigious venues within Commorragh. The Cabal of the Flayed Skull has developed specialized relationships with witch cults that emphasize aerial combat and high-speed maneuvering, providing access to advanced flight technology and training facilities that can accommodate three-dimensional combat scenarios. The collaboration between these organizations has resulted in the development of new forms of arena entertainment that combine traditional gladiatorial combat with aerial acrobatics and vehicle-based engagements. The cross-training opportunities provided through these partnerships allow cult members to develop skills that prove valuable during raiding operations, while providing the Cabal with access to fighters who possess specialized capabilities that complement their existing military forces. The political alliances that develop between witch cults and their Cabal sponsors often extend beyond simple commercial relationships to encompass mutual defense agreements and intelligence sharing arrangements that can provide significant advantages during territorial disputes or succession conflicts. The information networks maintained by witch cults, which extend throughout Commorragh's entertainment industry and include contacts within multiple social strata, can provide valuable intelligence about political developments and potential threats. The combat skills possessed by cult members can also prove useful during conflicts that require specialized capabilities or deniable operations that cannot be directly attributed to specific cabals. The economic impact of the entertainment industry, centered around witch cult activities, extends throughout Commorragh's economy, generating employment opportunities for support personnel, creating demand for specialized equipment and facilities, and providing venues for the social interactions that facilitate political and commercial negotiations. The arena events serve as neutral ground where representatives of different factions can meet and conduct business while enjoying entertainment that reinforces the cultural values and aesthetic preferences that define Drukhari society. The betting and gambling activities that accompany major arena events generate additional revenue streams while providing mechanisms for the redistribution of wealth that can influence political relationships and factional dynamics. The technological innovations developed for arena combat often find applications in other areas of Drukhari society, from military equipment and raiding gear to the torture devices and psychic energy extraction systems that support the Dark City's fundamental economic activities. The competitive environment created by inter-cult rivalry drives continuous innovation in weapon design, protective equipment, and performance enhancement technologies that benefit the broader society while maintaining the entertainment value that justifies continued investment in arena activities. The most successful innovations are typically those that can increase the intensity and duration of suffering while maintaining the visual spectacle that keeps audiences engaged throughout extended events. The recruitment practices employed by different witch cults vary significantly depending on their specific specializations and cultural traditions, with some organizations focusing on the identification and development of natural athletic talent, while others emphasize the cultivation of artistic sensibilities and performance capabilities. The most prestigious cults maintain extensive scouting networks that monitor arena events throughout Commorragh, identifying promising fighters who demonstrate the potential for advancement within their organizations. The recruitment process typically involves extensive evaluation of candidates' physical capabilities, psychological characteristics, and compatibility with existing cult culture and training methodologies. The training programs developed by major witch cults incorporate elements of physical conditioning, combat technique instruction, psychological preparation, and artistic development that are designed to create well-rounded performers capable of succeeding in the diverse range of entertainment venues throughout Commorragh. The most comprehensive programs can require decades to complete, with trainees progressing through increasingly challenging levels of instruction while demonstrating their mastery of various skills and techniques. The graduation ceremonies that mark the completion of training programs often serve as major social events that provide opportunities for networking and the establishment of relationships that can prove valuable throughout a fighter's career. The ancient haemonculi represent perhaps the most disturbing evolution of Aeldari scientific knowledge, their millennia of existence dedicated to the systematic exploration of pain, biological manipulation, and the boundaries between life and death. These grotesque figures emerged from the ranks of the pre-fall Aeldari's most accomplished flesh sculptors and bioarchitects, individuals who had already begun pushing the limits of biological modification when the birth of Slaanesh shattered their civilization. Unlike their cabal and witch cult counterparts who adapted to life in Commorragh through political maneuvering or martial prowess, the haemonculi survived by embracing the very corruption that had consumed their species, transforming themselves into beings that exist in a state between living flesh and technological augmentation. The transformation process that creates a haemonculus begins with the systematic replacement of organic components with sophisticated biomechanical systems that can sustain consciousness even when the original body has been extensively modified or damaged. The earliest stages involve the installation of neural interface systems that allow direct control over laboratory equipment and experimental subjects, while later modifications can include the integration of additional limbs, sensory organs, and processing capabilities that extend far beyond the limitations of natural Aeldari physiology. The most ancient haemonculi have undergone so many modifications that their original forms are completely unrecognizable, their bodies becoming sprawling collections of mechanical appendages, biological experiments, and hybrid technologies that defy conventional understanding. The laboratories maintained by individual haemonculi throughout Commorragh's dimensional expanse represent some of the most technologically advanced facilities in the galaxy, incorporating equipment and techniques that combine pre-fall Aeldari science with innovations developed through millennia of experimentation on countless subjects. These facilities are typically constructed in the deeper levels of the Dark City, where the reduced oversight from Cabal authorities allows for the kind of extensive modifications and expansions that characterize major research installations. The laboratory complexes often extend through multiple dimensional layers, with different sections dedicated to specific types of research and experimentation. The flesh sculpting chambers that serve as the primary workspace for most haemonculi incorporate sophisticated life support systems, capable of maintaining subjects in various states of consciousness and physical modification throughout extended procedures. The operating tables are equipped with neural interface systems that allow direct manipulation of pain receptors and consciousness levels, ensuring that subjects remain aware of their situation while preventing them from losing consciousness due to trauma or shock. The surgical implements employed range from conventional cutting tools to exotic devices that can manipulate matter at the molecular level, reshaping bone and tissue according to the operator's artistic vision while maintaining the biological functions necessary for continued survival. The specimen storage areas adjacent to these operating chambers house extensive collections of biological samples, experimental subjects, and partially completed projects that represent decades or centuries of accumulated research. The preservation systems employed can maintain organic materials in states of suspended animation, allowing haemonculi to return to previous experiments or combine elements from different projects to create new forms of hybrid creatures. The most valuable specimens are those that demonstrate unusual pain responses or possess biological characteristics that can be incorporated into other subjects, creating a complex economy of biological resources that operates parallel to Commorragh's conventional slave markets. The experimental facilities operated by major haemonculi covens incorporate testing environments that can simulate various atmospheric conditions, gravitational fields, and environmental hazards to evaluate the performance of modified subjects under different operational parameters. These facilities are essential for the development of specialized creatures designed for specific purposes, from combat applications to entertainment venues. The testing protocols employed are designed to push experimental subjects to their absolute limits while gathering detailed data about their capabilities and limitations, information that can be used to refine future modifications and improve the effectiveness of subsequent experiments. The covenant system that binds haemonculi to the various kabals and other organizations throughout Commorragh operates according to principles that predate the establishment of the Dark City itself, drawing on contractual traditions that extend back to the pre-fall era when flesh sculptors served the Aeldari nobility as artists and medical practitioners. These agreements typically involve the provision of specific services or products in exchange for resources, protection, and access to experimental subjects. The terms of individual covenants can be extraordinarily complex, incorporating multiple layers of obligation and reciprocal benefit that ensure both parties receive value from the arrangement while protecting their respective interests. The services provided by haemonculi to their cabal patrons extend far beyond simple medical treatment to encompass the creation of specialized creatures, the modification of existing personnel, and the development of biological weapons designed for specific tactical applications. The resurrection techniques mastered by the most accomplished haemonculi allow them to restore fallen archons and other valuable individuals to life, though the process typically involves extensive modifications that can alter the subject's physical and mental characteristics. The prices demanded for these services reflect both the technical complexity involved and the strategic value of the results, with major resurrection projects often requiring years of preparation and substantial resource commitments. The pain enhancement technologies developed by haemonculi covens represent some of their most commercially successful innovations, providing tools and techniques that can amplify suffering while maintaining the subject's consciousness and awareness throughout extended torture sessions. These systems incorporate neural interface technology that can directly stimulate pain receptors while bypassing the body's natural defense mechanisms, creating levels of agony that would normally result in unconsciousness or death. The most sophisticated devices can be calibrated to produce specific types of suffering tailored to individual subjects' psychological and physiological characteristics, maximizing the psychic energy generated while ensuring optimal entertainment value for observers. The biological weapons created by haemonculi laboratories include various forms of toxins, pathogens, and parasitic organisms designed to incapacitate or eliminate specific target species while leaving others unaffected. The development of these weapons requires extensive research into the biological characteristics of potential targets, with different formulations created for use against humans, orcs, tau, and other species commonly encountered during Drukhari raids. The most effective weapons are those that can cause prolonged suffering while preventing immediate death, allowing raiders to capture victims alive for transport back to Commorragh, while ensuring that resistance is minimized through the infliction of debilitating pain. The grotesque creatures that emerge from haemonculi laboratories serve various functions within Drukhari society, from combat applications and entertainment purposes to specialized roles in the maintenance and operation of the Dark City's infrastructure. The racks that serve as the primary workforce for most covens represent the most common form of biological modification, with captured subjects undergoing systematic alteration that enhances their physical capabilities while reducing their capacity for independent thought or resistance. The transformation process typically involves the replacement of major organ systems with biomechanical alternatives, the installation of additional limbs or sensory organs, and extensive neural modification that ensures absolute loyalty to their creators. The more exotic creatures produced by advanced haemonculi represent unique solutions to specific problems or challenges, with each specimen designed according to detailed specifications that reflect the intended application. The grotesques employed as heavy assault units combine massive physical strength with sophisticated weapon systems integrated directly into their modified bodies, creating living weapons that can operate in environments where conventional equipment would prove inadequate. The development of these creatures requires extensive experimentation with different biological templates and modification techniques, with successful designs often serving as the basis for further refinements and variations. Urian Rakarth stands as perhaps the most accomplished and notorious of all haemonculi, his reputation built upon millennia of groundbreaking research and the creation of some of the most sophisticated biological modifications ever achieved within Commorragh. His laboratories, hidden within the deepest recesses of the Dark City's dimensional structure, house experimental facilities that surpass those of entire covens in their scope and technological sophistication. The creatures that emerge from Rakarth's workshops represent the pinnacle of haemonculi achievement, incorporating innovations that push the boundaries of what is possible through biological manipulation and technological integration. The resurrection techniques perfected by Urian Rakarth have revolutionized Drukhari society by providing a form of immortality that operates independently of the traditional Aeldari reliance on psychic preservation methods. The process involves the systematic mapping and preservation of neural patterns, allowing consciousness to be transferred between different physical forms while maintaining continuity of memory and personality. The bodies used for resurrection are typically heavily modified versions of the original form, incorporating improvements and enhancements that reflect advances in biological engineering techniques developed since the subject's previous death. The political influence wielded by major haemonculi like Urian Rakarth extends throughout Commorragh's power structure, with their unique capabilities making them indispensable to the various factions that compete for dominance within the Dark City. The ability to restore fallen leaders to life provides these ancient beings with leverage that transcends conventional political relationships, as even the most powerful archons must consider the possibility that they may one day require the services that only a master haemonculus can provide. This relationship creates a complex dynamic where political authority and scientific expertise intersect in ways that can dramatically influence the outcomes of factional conflicts and succession disputes. The training and development of new haemonculi requires decades or centuries of intensive study and practical experience, with apprentices gradually mastering the various techniques and technologies necessary for independent operation. The selection process for potential candidates emphasizes not only technical aptitude, but also the psychological characteristics necessary to perform extensive modifications on conscious subjects, while maintaining the scientific objectivity required for effective research. The most successful apprentices are those who can combine technical expertise with the kind of creative vision that leads to innovative approaches and breakthrough discoveries. The Coven of the 12 represents one of the most influential haemonculi organizations within Commorragh, their collective expertise spanning the full range of biological manipulation techniques while maintaining research facilities that rival those of individual master practitioners. The Coven's approach to experimentation emphasizes collaborative research projects that combine the specialized knowledge of multiple members, creating opportunities for innovations that would be impossible for individual researchers to achieve. The political influence wielded by the Coven derives from their collective bargaining power and their ability to provide services that require coordination between multiple specialists. The relationship between haemonculi covens and the witch cults creates opportunities for collaborative projects that enhance the entertainment value of arena events while providing research opportunities for biological modification specialists. The development of enhanced combatants through surgical modification and chemical enhancement allows for the creation of spectacular contests that generate substantial psychic energy while serving as testing environments for new techniques and technologies. The most successful collaborations result in fighters whose modified capabilities create new forms of entertainment that attract larger audiences while demonstrating the practical applications of haemonculi research. The economic impact of haemonculi activities extends throughout Commorragh's complex economy, with their services and products creating demand for specialized materials, equipment, and facilities, while generating employment opportunities for support personnel and technical specialists. The biological resources required for major modification projects often necessitate specific types of raids and capture operations, influencing the targeting priorities and tactical approaches employed by various kabals. The most valuable specimens are those that possess unique biological characteristics or demonstrate unusual responses to modification procedures, creating premium markets that can command extraordinary prices. The technological innovations developed within haemonculi laboratories often find applications beyond their original intended purposes, with advances in biological manipulation contributing to improvements in medical treatment, combat enhancement, and the various torture devices that support Commorragh's entertainment industry. The competitive environment created by inter-coven rivalry drives continuous innovation while ensuring that successful techniques and technologies are gradually disseminated throughout the broader haemonculi community. The most significant breakthroughs are typically those that can be applied to multiple different types of projects while providing measurable improvements in effectiveness or efficiency. The preservation and expansion of pre-fall Aeldari scientific knowledge represents one of the most important contributions made by the haemonculi to Drukhari civilization, with their research activities serving to maintain and develop technological capabilities that would otherwise be lost to the passage of time. The archives maintained by major covens contain detailed records of experimental procedures, modification techniques, and theoretical frameworks that span millennia of accumulated research. The most valuable information is that which relates to the fundamental principles underlying biological manipulation, as this knowledge forms the foundation for all subsequent innovations and developments. The recruitment of experimental subjects for haemonculi research requires careful coordination with the various organizations responsible for conducting raids and managing slave populations throughout Commorragh. The specifications for research subjects can be extremely detailed, encompassing everything from specific biological characteristics and psychological profiles to particular types of previous trauma or modification. The most valuable subjects are often those that have been specifically captured for research purposes, with raiding parties receiving detailed instructions about handling and transportation requirements to ensure that specimens arrive at their destinations in optimal condition for experimentation. The parasitic nature of Commorragh's existence demands constant predation upon the material universe, as the dimensional barriers that protect the Dark City from Slaanesh simultaneously sever its inhabitants from the natural psychic currents that sustain all Aeldari life. This fundamental dependency has shaped Drukhari civilization into a vast machine of suffering extraction, where every aspect of society revolves around the systematic harvesting of pain and terror from real space populations. The raiding culture that emerged from this necessity has evolved far beyond simple resource acquisition into a sophisticated art form that combines military precision with theatrical cruelty, creating spectacles of violence that serve both practical and cultural purposes within the Dark City's twisted hierarchy. The Webway portal network that enables Drukhari raids represents one of the most strategically valuable assets controlled by Commorragh's ruling factions, providing instantaneous access to targets across the galaxy while maintaining the security that comes from dimensional isolation. These ancient passages, originally constructed by the Aeldari Empire at the height of its power, have been extensively modified and expanded by successive generations of Dark City engineers to accommodate the specific requirements of raiding operations. The portal systems incorporate sophisticated targeting mechanisms that can identify suitable entry points within real space, analyzing defensive capabilities and population densities to optimize the selection of raid targets. The maintenance and control of Webway access points requires constant vigilance and substantial resource investment, as the dimensional tunnels are subject to various forms of degradation and interference that can render them impassable or dangerous to traverse. The portal guardians responsible for monitoring these passages undergo extensive training in dimensional engineering and defensive combat, as their positions make them prime targets for enemies seeking to disrupt Drukhari operations or gain unauthorized access to the Webway network. The most critical portals are protected by multiple layers of security systems, including automated defense platforms, dimensional barriers, and rapid response forces that can seal compromised passages before they can be exploited by hostile forces. The strategic value of controlling specific Webway routes has created intense competition between different cabals, with territorial disputes often centering on access rights to particularly valuable passages. The most sought-after routes are those that provide direct access to heavily populated regions of the Imperium, Tau space, or other areas where large numbers of potential victims can be found with minimal defensive interference. The negotiation and enforcement of access agreements requires sophisticated diplomatic skills and the constant threat of military action, as violations of territorial boundaries can quickly escalate into full-scale conflicts that disrupt operations throughout the affected regions. The relationship between successful raiding operations and social advancement within Drukhari society creates powerful incentives for increasingly ambitious and elaborate campaigns, as leaders who can deliver exceptional results gain access to resources and political influence that would otherwise remain beyond their reach. The measurement of raid success extends beyond simple quantitative metrics, like the number of captives taken or resources acquired, to encompass qualitative factors such as the creativity of the tactics employed, the suffering inflicted upon victims, and the entertainment value provided to observers. The most prestigious raids are those that combine practical success with artistic achievement, demonstrating the raider's mastery of both military science and the aesthetic principles that govern Drukhari culture. The planning phase of major raiding operations can extend over months or years, with intelligence gathering networks providing detailed information about target populations, defensive capabilities, and optimal timing for maximum impact. The reconnaissance activities that support these operations utilize advanced surveillance technology and infiltration techniques that can provide real-time intelligence about target conditions while remaining undetected by local security forces. The most sophisticated intelligence operations involve the placement of long-term agents within target populations, individuals who can provide ongoing information about defensive preparations and identify high-value targets for capture or elimination. The selection of raid targets reflects both practical considerations related to resource acquisition and strategic objectives that serve the broader political interests of the sponsoring organizations. The most valuable targets are those that combine large populations of potential victims with minimal defensive capabilities and convenient access through the Webway network. Industrial worlds with concentrated worker populations represent particularly attractive targets, as they offer opportunities for mass capture operations while providing access to technological resources that can be valuable for trade or military applications. Hive worlds present more complex challenges due to their defensive systems and population density, but successful raids against these targets can yield enormous quantities of captives and generate substantial prestige for the participating forces. The rapid deployment capabilities provided by Webway access allow Drukhari raiding forces to achieve complete tactical surprise against most target populations, as conventional defensive systems are designed to detect threats approaching through real space rather than dimensional translocation. The ability to materialize raiding forces directly within target areas bypasses perimeter defenses and early warning systems, creating opportunities for devastating first strikes that can neutralize organized resistance before it can develop. The most effective deployment strategies involve simultaneous attacks on multiple objectives, spreading defensive forces thin while preventing coordination between different resistance elements. The tactical doctrines employed by Drukhari raiding forces emphasize speed, precision, and psychological impact over the grinding attrition, warfare favored by many other military organizations. The typical raid begins with lightning strikes against command and communication facilities, disrupting the target population's ability to coordinate defensive responses while creating confusion and panic that facilitates subsequent operations. The use of terror weapons and psychological warfare techniques serves both tactical and strategic purposes, weakening resistance while generating the fear and suffering that provide psychic sustenance for the raiders and their home city. The quick retreat capabilities that characterize Drukhari operations represent one of their most significant tactical advantages, allowing raiding forces to withdraw through Webway portals before enemy reinforcements can arrive or organized counterattacks can be mounted. The timing of these withdrawals requires careful coordination between ground forces and portal operators, as premature retreat can result in the loss of valuable captives or resources, while delayed withdrawal risks the destruction of raiding forces by superior enemy numbers. The most successful raid commanders are those who can accurately assess the tactical situation and make withdrawal decisions that maximize gains while minimizing losses. The security measures that protect retreating Drukhari forces include sophisticated portal defense systems that can prevent pursuit by enemy forces while ensuring that Webway passages remain secure against infiltration or sabotage. The dimensional barriers that separate the Webway from real space provide natural protection against most forms of pursuit, but specialized enemy forces equipped with psychic capabilities or advanced technology can sometimes breach these defenses. The portal guardians responsible for managing retreat operations maintain contingency plans for sealing compromised passages and redirecting fleeing forces through alternative routes to prevent enemy access to the broader Webway network. The types of raiding operations conducted by different Drukhari organizations vary significantly in scope, complexity, and objectives, reflecting the diverse needs and capabilities of the various factions that compete for dominance within Commorragh's political hierarchy. The quick slave-taking expeditions that represent the most common form of raid are typically conducted by smaller kabals or specialized units seeking to acquire specific types of captives for particular purposes. These operations prioritize speed and stealth over elaborate planning, focusing on isolated settlements or transportation routes where victims can be captured with minimal resistance and transported back to Commorragh before defensive forces can respond. The planning requirements for simple slave raids are relatively modest, involving basic reconnaissance to identify suitable targets and escape routes while ensuring that Webway access remains secure throughout the operation. The forces employed in these raids typically consist of small, highly mobile units equipped with specialized capture equipment and non-lethal weapons designed to incapacitate victims without causing damage that would reduce their value as sources of psychic energy. The success of these operations depends primarily on tactical execution and timing rather than elaborate strategic planning or massive resource commitments. The elaborate campaigns of terror and destruction that represent the pinnacle of Drukhari raiding culture require extensive planning, substantial resource commitments, and coordination between multiple organizations to achieve their ambitious objectives. These operations are typically sponsored by major cabals seeking to demonstrate their power and capabilities while acquiring the massive quantities of captives and resources necessary to support large-scale political initiatives. The planning phase for major campaigns can involve detailed analysis of target defenses, the development of specialized equipment and tactics, and the negotiation of complex agreements between participating organizations regarding resource allocation and the distribution of captured assets. The execution of major raiding campaigns often involves multiple phases of operation, beginning with preliminary strikes designed to weaken defensive capabilities and gather intelligence about target responses. The main assault phase typically employs overwhelming force applied at carefully selected points to achieve rapid breakthrough and maximize the disruption of enemy defensive coordination. The exploitation phase focuses on the systematic capture of prisoners and resources while maintaining the momentum necessary to prevent effective counterattacks. The withdrawal phase requires careful coordination to ensure that all participating forces and their captured assets can be evacuated safely through available Webway portals. The terror campaigns that serve as signature operations for some of the most notorious Drukhari leaders combine practical objectives with elaborate displays of cruelty designed to generate maximum psychological impact on target populations. These operations often involve the systematic torture and execution of captured victims in public settings, creating spectacles of suffering that serve both as entertainment for the raiders and as psychological weapons against surviving populations. The most sophisticated terror campaigns incorporate elements of psychological warfare designed to create lasting trauma that can persist long after the raiders have withdrawn, ensuring that the fear generated continues to provide psychic sustenance even after the conclusion of active operations. The resource extraction operations that accompany major raids focus on the acquisition of materials and technologies that can enhance Drukhari military capabilities or provide valuable trade commodities within Commorragh's complex economy. The most valuable resources are those that cannot be produced within the Dark City's artificial environment, including rare minerals, advanced technologies, and biological specimens that can serve as raw materials for haemonculi experiments. The systematic looting of target facilities requires specialized equipment and expertise to identify and extract the most valuable items, while maintaining the speed necessary to complete operations before enemy reinforcements can arrive. The coordination between different types of raiding operations creates synergistic effects that enhance the overall effectiveness of Drukhari predation, while providing opportunities for smaller organizations to participate in operations that would otherwise exceed their individual capabilities. The intelligence gathered during preliminary raids can inform the planning of subsequent major operations, while the resources acquired through successful campaigns can fund additional raids that expand the scope and frequency of Drukhari activities. The most successful raiding programs are those that maintain continuous cycles of operation, using the results of each raid to plan and resource subsequent operations, while building the experience and reputation necessary for increasingly ambitious undertakings. The impact of successful raiding operations extends throughout Commorragh's social and political structure, providing advancement opportunities for ambitious individuals while generating the resources necessary to maintain the Dark City's complex infrastructure. The distribution of captured slaves and resources serves as a mechanism for rewarding loyalty and competence, while punishing failure and disloyalty within the various organizational hierarchies. The most successful raid leaders gain access to increasingly prestigious assignments and greater resource allocations, creating positive feedback loops that can lead to rapid advancement through the ranks of their respective organizations. The prestige associated with particularly successful or innovative raids creates lasting reputations that can influence political relationships and commercial opportunities throughout a leader's career. The development of signature tactical approaches, or the achievement of particularly spectacular victories, can establish individual raiders as recognized experts in specific types of operations, leading to consulting opportunities and leadership positions within major campaigns. The most renowned raid leaders often attract followers from other organizations, creating opportunities for the formation of new kabals or the expansion of existing ones through the recruitment of experienced personnel. The competition between different raiding organizations drives continuous innovation in tactics, equipment, and operational planning, as successful techniques are quickly adopted by rival groups while new approaches are developed to maintain competitive advantages. The sharing of information and resources between allied organizations creates opportunities for collaborative operations that can achieve objectives beyond the capabilities of individual groups, while the secrecy surrounding proprietary techniques and technologies ensures that competitive advantages can be maintained over extended periods. The most successful raiding cultures are those that can balance cooperation and competition to maximize both individual advancement and collective effectiveness. The training programs that prepare Drukhari forces for raiding operations incorporate extensive instruction in the specific skills and techniques required for successful operations in real-space environments. The curriculum includes tactical planning, equipment operation, prisoner handling, and the psychological conditioning necessary to maintain focus and effectiveness during extended operations away from Commorragh's supportive environment. The most comprehensive training programs also include instruction in the cultural and technological characteristics of different target species, enabling raiders to adapt their approaches to the specific vulnerabilities and defensive capabilities of various enemy populations. The equipment and technology employed in Drukhari raiding operations reflects the specialized requirements of operations that must achieve rapid success while maintaining the mobility necessary for quick withdrawal through Webway portals. The weapon systems favored by raiding forces emphasize precision and non-lethality over raw destructive power, as the primary objective is typically the capture of living victims rather than their elimination. The vehicles and aircraft used in these operations incorporate advanced stealth systems and dimensional manipulation technology that allows them to operate effectively in real space while maintaining the ability to retreat quickly to the safety of the Webway network. The logistical support systems that enable sustained raiding operations require sophisticated planning and resource management to ensure that forces can operate effectively at extended distances from their home base while maintaining the security necessary to prevent enemy infiltration or sabotage. The supply chains that support major operations must be capable of providing ammunition, medical supplies, and replacement equipment, while maintaining the secrecy necessary to prevent enemy intelligence services from tracking and disrupting Drukhari activities. The most effective logistical systems are those that can adapt quickly to changing operational requirements, while maintaining the redundancy necessary to continue operations, even when individual supply routes are compromised or destroyed. The labyrinthine network of Webway portals that connects Commorragh to real space represents one of the most sophisticated transportation systems ever devised, a three-dimensional maze of dimensional tunnels that spans the galaxy while remaining hidden from conventional detection methods. These ancient passages, originally constructed during the height of the Aeldari Empire, have been extensively modified and expanded by successive generations of Dark City engineers to serve the specific requirements of Drukhari predation. The portal network consists of primary arteries that can accommodate large-scale military operations, secondary passages designed for rapid deployment of smaller forces, and countless tertiary routes that provide emergency access and alternative pathways when main thoroughfares become compromised or contested. The dimensional engineering that maintains these passages requires constant attention from specialized technicians who possess knowledge of principles that predate the fall by millennia. The Webway tunnels exist in a state of controlled instability, their walls composed of crystallized psychic energy that must be continuously reinforced to prevent collapse into the chaotic energies of the warp. The maintenance crews responsible for this work operate sophisticated equipment that can detect structural weaknesses, repair dimensional fractures, and strengthen tunnel walls against the various forces that constantly threaten their integrity. The most critical maintenance operations involve the replacement of damaged portal generators, massive devices that anchor the tunnel endpoints in both the Webway and real space, while providing the energy necessary to maintain stable dimensional connections. The portal control systems that govern access to the Webway network incorporate multiple layers of security designed to prevent unauthorized use while ensuring rapid deployment capabilities for legitimate raiding operations. Each major portal is equipped with identification scanners that can verify the authorization codes of approaching vessels, while automated defense systems stand ready to destroy unauthorized craft that attempt to force entry into restricted passages. The control centers that coordinate these systems maintain constant communication with Commorragh's central command authority, providing real-time updates on portal status and traffic flow, while requesting permission for major deployments or emergency access protocols. The strategic importance of controlling specific Webway routes has created a complex system of territorial claims and access agreements that governs the relationships between different Drukhari factions. The most valuable passages are those that provide direct access to heavily populated regions of the galaxy, particularly Imperial hive worlds and industrial centers, where large numbers of potential captives can be found with relatively minimal defensive interference. The ownership of these premium routes is typically concentrated among the most powerful kabals, who maintain their control through a combination of military strength, political influence, and the constant threat of retaliation against any faction that attempts to challenge their territorial claims. The negotiation of portal access rights involves complex diplomatic processes that can extend over decades, with agreements typically including detailed specifications regarding usage schedules, maintenance responsibilities, and the distribution of resources required to keep the passages operational. The most contentious negotiations involve routes that traverse territories claimed by multiple factions, requiring elaborate power-sharing arrangements that must account for the varying capabilities and interests of all parties involved. The enforcement of these agreements relies primarily on the threat of mutual destruction, as violations can quickly escalate into conflicts that disrupt operations throughout entire sections of the Webway network. The defensive measures protecting Commorragh's portal network extend far beyond simple access controls to encompass sophisticated early warning systems, automated response protocols, and rapid deployment capabilities that can counter various types of threats. The sensor arrays that monitor Webway approaches utilize technology that can detect approaching vessels while they are still thousands of kilometers away, providing sufficient warning time for defensive forces to prepare appropriate responses. The most advanced sensors can identify specific vessel types and energy signatures, allowing defenders to tailor their responses to the particular capabilities and intentions of detected threats. The portal wards that protect major Webway entrances represent some of the most sophisticated defensive technology available within Commorragh, incorporating principles of dimensional manipulation that can selectively prevent specific types of objects or entities from passing through designated portals. These systems can be configured to block particular species, energy signatures, or technological devices while allowing authorized traffic to pass without interference. The most advanced ward systems can even detect and neutralize hostile intent using psychic scanning technology to identify individuals who pose potential threats to the Dark City's security regardless of their apparent authorization status. The Guardian constructs that serve as the primary defensive forces for critical portal installations combine advanced artificial intelligence with sophisticated weapon systems and dimensional manipulation capabilities. These mechanical sentinels are programmed with extensive tactical databases that allow them to respond appropriately to various types of threats while maintaining the flexibility necessary to adapt to unexpected situations. The most powerful Guardian constructs are equipped with weapons that can function effectively in both the Webway environment and real space, ensuring that they can engage threats regardless of their dimensional origin or intended destination. The dimensional barriers that provide additional protection for sensitive portal installations utilize technology that can selectively phase sections of the Webway out of normal space-time, rendering them temporarily inaccessible to hostile forces while maintaining communication and supply links with friendly units. These barriers can be activated instantly in response to detected threats, creating impenetrable defensive positions that can withstand even the most determined assault attempts. The energy requirements for maintaining dimensional barriers are substantial, requiring dedicated power generation facilities and sophisticated energy distribution networks to ensure continuous operation during extended conflicts. The few successful invasions of Commorragh throughout its long history have provided valuable lessons about the vulnerabilities inherent in even the most sophisticated defensive systems, while demonstrating the catastrophic consequences that can result when these defenses are breached or circumvented. The most significant of these incursions occurred during the 36th millennium, when a Space Marine strike force managed to penetrate the Dark City's outer defenses and establish a foothold within the dimensional pocket itself. The Imperial forces, belonging to the Salamanders chapter, utilized specialized equipment designed specifically for Webway operations, including dimensional anchor devices that prevented the Drukhari from simply sealing off the compromised sections and waiting for the invaders to exhaust their supplies. The Imperial invasion force consisted of approximately 200 Space Marines, supported by specialized equipment and vehicles adapted for operations in the unique environment of the Webway network. The strike force had been assembled specifically to respond to increased Drukhari raiding activity in the Nocturne system, with intelligence gathered from captured raiders providing crucial information about portal locations and defensive arrangements. The preparation for this operation had required months of planning and the development of specialized tactics designed to exploit the known weaknesses of Drukhari defensive systems, while countering their advantages in mobility and dimensional manipulation. The initial breach of Commorragh's defenses was achieved through a coordinated assault on multiple portal installations simultaneously, spreading the defensive forces thin while preventing effective coordination of the response. The Space Marines utilized teleportation technology to bypass outer defensive perimeters, appearing directly within critical control facilities and eliminating key personnel before alarms could be raised. The dimensional anchor devices deployed during these initial strikes prevented the Drukhari from sealing the compromised portals, forcing them to engage the Imperial forces in direct combat rather than simply isolating and containing the threat. The fighting that followed the initial breach demonstrated both the effectiveness of Space Marine tactics in close-quarters combat and the adaptability of Drukhari defensive systems when faced with unprecedented threats. The Imperial forces found themselves operating in an environment that defied conventional tactical doctrine, with gravity fields that could shift without warning, architectural features that could reconfigure themselves during combat, and atmospheric conditions that varied dramatically between different sections of the dimensional pocket. The Space Marines adapted to these challenges by maintaining tight unit cohesion and utilizing their superior equipment and training to overcome the environmental disadvantages they faced. The Drukhari response to the Imperial invasion revealed significant weaknesses in their command and control systems, as the various kabals initially struggled to coordinate an effective defense against an enemy that operated according to unfamiliar tactical principles. The competitive nature of Drukhari society created additional complications, with some factions initially viewing the invasion as an opportunity to settle scores with rivals rather than a threat requiring unified response. The political maneuvering that accompanied the military response allowed the Imperial forces to achieve objectives that would have been impossible against a properly coordinated defense. The systematic destruction of infrastructure targets by the Space Marine Strike Force caused significant disruption to Commorragh's operations, with power generation facilities, communication networks, and transportation systems suffering extensive damage that required months to repair fully. The Imperial forces demonstrated particular effectiveness against the slave processing facilities that formed the economic foundation of several major cabals, liberating thousands of captives while destroying equipment that represented centuries of accumulated technological development. The psychological impact of these successes extended far beyond their immediate tactical significance, demonstrating to the Drukhari population that their supposedly impregnable stronghold could be breached and their most important facilities destroyed by determined enemies. The eventual repulsion of the Imperial invasion required the intervention of Asdrubal Vecht himself, who recognized that the continued presence of Space Marine forces within Commorragh posed an existential threat to the established order. Vecht's response involved the systematic manipulation of the invasion's political implications, using the crisis to eliminate several rival archons whose defensive failures had contributed to the Imperial success, while consolidating control over the military resources necessary to mount an effective counterattack. The coordination of this response demonstrated Vecht's superior understanding of both military tactics and political maneuvering, as he managed to turn a potential disaster into an opportunity for advancing his own position within the Dark City's hierarchy. The final assault that eliminated the remaining Imperial forces involved the deployment of specialized weapons and tactics that had been held in reserve for the most extreme emergencies. The Drukhari forces employed dimensional manipulation technology to trap sections of the Space Marine force in collapsing pocket dimensions, while exotic energy weapons were used to penetrate the advanced armor systems that had previously provided protection against conventional Drukhari weaponry. The elimination of the dimensional anchor devices that had prevented portal closure required suicide missions by specialized assault teams, demonstrating the lengths to which the Drukhari were willing to go to restore their security. The consequences of the Imperial invasion extended far beyond the immediate military and political effects, fundamentally altering the defensive arrangements and security protocols that governed access to Commorragh. The vulnerabilities exposed during the conflict led to comprehensive reviews of existing defensive systems, resulting in the implementation of new technologies and procedures designed to prevent similar breaches in the future. The portal ward systems were extensively upgraded to provide better detection and interdiction capabilities, while the Guardian Construct forces were expanded and equipped with weapons specifically designed to counter Space Marine tactics and equipment. The political ramifications of the invasion provided Vecht with the justification necessary to implement sweeping changes to Commorragh's governmental structure, centralizing control over defensive systems while eliminating the autonomous authority that had previously allowed individual kabals to make independent decisions regarding portal security. The new command structure ensured that future defensive operations would be coordinated from a central authority, preventing the kind of factional competition that had initially hindered the response to the Imperial assault. The redistribution of territorial control that accompanied these changes allowed Vecht to reward loyal supporters while punishing those whose failures had contributed to the security breach. The lessons learned from the Imperial invasion influenced the development of new defensive technologies and tactical doctrines that have shaped Commorragh's security arrangements for millennia. The enhanced sensor systems that now monitor Webway approaches incorporate multiple redundant detection methods designed to identify threats regardless of their technological sophistication or stealth capabilities. The response protocols that govern defensive operations have been refined to ensure rapid coordination between different units and facilities, while the training programs for defensive personnel emphasize the importance of maintaining security awareness even during routine operations. The strategic importance of controlling Webway access points extends beyond simple territorial considerations to encompass the broader political dynamics that govern relationships between different Drukhari factions. The ability to grant or deny access to specific portal routes provides powerful leverage in negotiations, while the control of critical junctions can determine the success or failure of major raiding operations. The most influential kabals are those that maintain control over multiple access points, allowing them to influence the activities of smaller organizations while ensuring their own operational flexibility and security. The political implications of portal ownership create complex webs of obligation and dependency that can span multiple generations of leadership within individual organizations. The agreements that govern shared access to valuable routes typically include provisions for mutual defense, intelligence sharing, and resource allocation that bind the participating factions together in relationships that extend far beyond simple commercial arrangements. The violation of these agreements can have consequences that affect not only the immediate parties involved, but entire networks of allied organizations that depend on the stability of existing arrangements. The maintenance of portal security requires constant vigilance against various types of threats, from direct military assault to subtle infiltration attempts designed to gather intelligence about defensive arrangements and operational procedures. The counterintelligence operations that protect against these threats utilize sophisticated surveillance technology and analysis techniques to identify potential security breaches before they can compromise critical systems. The most effective security programs are those that combine technological solutions with human intelligence gathering, creating multiple layers of protection that can detect and counter various types of hostile activity. The expansion of Commorragh's portal network continues even in the current era, with new passages being carved through the Webway to provide access to previously unreachable regions of the galaxy. These expansion projects require enormous resource commitments and years of careful planning to ensure that new routes can be properly integrated into existing defensive arrangements without creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited by hostile forces. The most ambitious expansion projects involve the creation of entirely new dimensional pockets that can serve as staging areas for major operations or emergency refuges in the event that Commorragh itself comes under attack. The technological innovations that support portal operations continue to evolve in response to changing operational requirements and emerging threats, with research programs focused on improving the reliability, security, and capacity of existing systems, while developing new capabilities that can provide strategic advantages over potential enemies. The most promising areas of development include improved dimensional anchoring systems that can maintain portal stability under adverse conditions, enhanced security protocols that can better detect and counter infiltration attempts, and new weapon systems specifically designed for Webway combat operations. The dimensional isolation that protects Commorragh from the predations of Slaanesh has not entirely severed the Dark City's connections to the broader Aeldari diaspora, though the relationships that persist between the Drukhari and their craftworld cousins represent some of the most complex and contradictory alliances in the galaxy. These interactions range from bitter hatred born of philosophical differences and mutual contempt to grudging cooperation when faced with threats that endanger the survival of their entire species. The fundamental ideological divide between the path-walking craftworld Aeldari and the sensation-seeking Drukhari creates tensions that can erupt into violence without warning. Yet both factions share genetic heritage and cultural memories that occasionally override their philosophical differences when circumstances demand unified action. The craftworld Aeldari view their Dark City cousins with a mixture of disgust and pity, seeing them as a cautionary example of what their entire species might have become without the discipline imposed by the path system and the guidance of their farseers. The systematic torture and exploitation that defines Drukhari society represents everything that the craftworld inhabitants have struggled to overcome in their attempts to create a sustainable post-fall civilization. The knowledge that the Drukhari continue to practice the very excesses that led to their species' downfall creates a sense of shame and revulsion that makes meaningful cooperation extremely difficult to achieve, even when strategic necessity demands coordinated action against common enemies. The Drukhari perspective on their craftworld relatives combines contempt for what they perceive as weakness and self-denial with a grudging respect for their military capabilities and technological achievements. The rigid discipline that governs craftworld society is viewed as an unnecessary limitation that prevents the full expression of Aeldari potential, while the path system is seen as a cowardly retreat from the realities of existence in a hostile galaxy. The psychic abilities that craftworld Aeldari wield with such effectiveness are simultaneously envied and despised, representing powers that the Drukhari have have deliberately abandoned in their flight from Slaanesh's influence. The practical considerations that occasionally force cooperation between these estranged branches of the Aeldari species typically involve threats that pose existential dangers to both factions, such as the expansion of chaos forces, major orc invasions, or the emergence of Necron tomb worlds in regions where both groups maintain significant interests. The coordination of joint operations requires extensive negotiation and the establishment of temporary command structures that can accommodate the radically different tactical doctrines and operational philosophies employed by each faction. The success of these collaborative efforts depends largely on the ability of leaders from both sides to suppress their mutual antipathy long enough to achieve shared objectives. The Battle of Eandon during the 13th Black Crusade provided one of the most significant examples of Drukhari craftworld cooperation in recent millennia, as forces from multiple Dark City kabals joined with the defenders of the damaged craftworld to repel a massive chaos invasion. The Drukhari contribution to this defense involved specialized assault units that could operate effectively in the confined spaces of the craftworld's damaged sections, while their knowledge of dimensional manipulation proved crucial in preventing chaos forces from exploiting breaches in the vessel's psychic defenses. The temporary alliance required both sides to suppress deeply held prejudices and coordinate tactics that had never been tested in joint operations. The aftermath of successful joint operations typically sees the immediate dissolution of cooperative arrangements, as both factions retreat to their respective domains to avoid the political complications that would arise from extended collaboration. The knowledge gained through these temporary alliances often proves valuable for future independent operations, with tactical innovations and intelligence information being adapted for use in contexts that do not require cooperation with ideologically opposed allies. The most successful joint operations are those that achieve their objectives quickly enough to prevent the development of relationships that might complicate future interactions between the participating factions. The interactions between Drukhari raiders and other Xenos species throughout the galaxy follow patterns that reflect both the practical requirements of slave-taking operations and the cultural prejudices that govern Drukhari attitudes toward non-Aeldari life forms. The Tau Empire represents a particularly attractive target for raiding operations due to the concentrated populations of their sept worlds and the relatively limited defensive capabilities of their military forces when faced with the kind of rapid deployment tactics favored by Dark City assault units. The technological sophistication of Tau society provides additional incentives for raiding activities, as their advanced equipment and industrial facilities can yield valuable resources that command premium prices in Commorragh's markets. The Tau response to Drukhari predation has evolved significantly over the centuries, with their military doctrine incorporating specific countermeasures designed to limit the effectiveness of hit and run raids while providing better protection for civilian populations. The development of rapid response forces equipped with advanced detection equipment has reduced the success rate of smaller raiding operations, while the construction of fortified population centers has made large-scale slave-taking expeditions more difficult and costly to execute. The adaptive nature of Tau military thinking has created an ongoing arms race between their defensive innovations and Drukhari tactical developments. The orc species presents unique challenges and opportunities for Drukhari raiders, as their aggressive nature and crude but effective technology create environments where traditional raiding tactics must be significantly modified to achieve success. The decentralized nature of orc society means that successful raids typically target specific tribal groups or isolated settlements, rather than attempting the kind of systematic population harvesting that proves effective against more organized species. The psychic resonance generated by orc populations during combat provides a different type of sustenance than the fear and despair favored by most Drukhari, requiring specialized extraction techniques and modified processing equipment. The relationship between Drukhari forces and Imperial military units reflects the fundamental incompatibility between the Imperium's defensive posture and the Dark City's predatory requirements, creating conflicts that have persisted for millennia without resolution. The vast scale of Imperial territory and population provides an almost inexhaustible supply of potential raid targets, while the diversity of Imperial military forces ensures that Drukhari raiders encounter different tactical challenges and defensive capabilities depending on the specific regions they choose to attack. The Imperial Guard regiments that defend most worlds lack the mobility and specialized equipment necessary to counter Drukhari hit and run tactics effectively, making them attractive targets for routine slave-taking operations. The Space Marine chapters that respond to Drukhari raids represent a significantly more dangerous opponent, possessing the tactical flexibility, advanced equipment, and individual combat effectiveness necessary to engage Dark City forces on relatively equal terms. The encounters between these elite Imperial forces and Drukhari raiders often result in devastating casualties for both sides, as the Space Marines' superior defensive capabilities clash with the Dark City's advantages in mobility and surprise. The most successful Drukhari operations against Space Marine forces are those that avoid direct confrontation while achieving specific objectives through stealth, misdirection, and the exploitation of tactical advantages provided by superior knowledge of local conditions. The Chaos forces that emerge from the Eye of Terror and other warp storms represent both potential allies and dangerous enemies for the Drukhari, depending on the specific circumstances of individual encounters and the strategic objectives of the parties involved. The shared opposition to Imperial expansion creates opportunities for temporary cooperation, while the fundamental differences in motivation and methodology prevent the development of lasting alliances. The Chaos Space Marines who lead many of these forces possess tactical knowledge and combat experience that can pose serious threats to Drukhari raiding operations, particularly when they are able to anticipate and counter the mobility advantages that typically ensure Dark City military success. The demon entities that accompany major Chaos incursions present unique dangers to Drukhari forces, as their warp-based nature allows them to potentially breach the dimensional barriers that normally protect Dark City raiders from psychic attack. The specialized equipment and tactics required to engage these entities effectively are typically reserved for the most elite Drukhari units, while routine raiding forces are instructed to avoid direct confrontation with demonic opponents whenever possible. The psychic energy generated by demon presence can interfere with the dimensional manipulation technology that enables Webway travel, creating additional risks for Drukhari forces operating in areas where major Chaos incursions are taking place. The Corsair bands that operate from Commorragh's ports represent a unique element within the Dark City's complex social structure, maintaining semi-independent status while contributing to the broader economy through their specialized raiding activities and trade relationships. These organizations typically consist of Aeldari from various backgrounds who have rejected both the rigid discipline of Craftworld society and the hierarchical constraints of traditional Cabal membership, choosing instead to pursue their own objectives while operating from bases within the Dark City's dimensional pocket. The diversity of their membership and operational approaches creates capabilities that complement those of the established Drukhari factions, while providing alternative sources of resources and intelligence. The Prince Iriel and his Eldritch Raiders represent one of the most successful and well-known Corsair operations based from Commorragh, though their relationship with the Dark City's ruling factions remains complex and often strained. The Raiders' focus on large-scale piracy and resource acquisition provides them with the wealth necessary to maintain their independence, while contributing to Commorragh's economy through trade and the provision of specialized services. Their extensive knowledge of shipping routes and commercial activities throughout the galaxy makes them valuable sources of intelligence for planning major raiding operations, while their combat experience and tactical expertise can prove crucial during joint operations against particularly challenging targets. The semi-independent status enjoyed by major corsair bands requires careful navigation of the political relationships that govern access to Commorragh's facilities and resources, as their activities must provide sufficient value to justify their continued presence while avoiding direct competition with established cabal interests. The most successful corsair leaders are those who can identify and exploit niche opportunities that complement rather than threaten the activities of their more powerful neighbors, creating mutually beneficial relationships that provide security and resources while maintaining operational flexibility. The failure to maintain these delicate political balances can result in the forced integration of corsair bands into existing cabals or their expulsion from Commorragh entirely. The economic role played by corsair operations within Commorragh's broader commercial structure extends beyond simple resource acquisition to encompass specialized services that require capabilities and knowledge not typically available within traditional Drukhari organizations. The intelligence networks maintained by successful corsair bands often extend into regions and populations that are difficult for conventional cabal operations to penetrate, providing valuable information about potential targets, defensive preparations, and commercial opportunities. The trade relationships established by corsair groups can also provide access to exotic resources and technologies that command premium prices within the Dark City's markets. The recruitment practices employed by corsair bands operating from Commorragh typically focus on individuals who possess specialized skills or knowledge that can contribute to the group's operational capabilities, regardless of their species or previous affiliations. This inclusive approach creates opportunities for non-Drukhari personnel to participate in Dark City activities while providing corsair groups with diverse capabilities that can prove advantageous during complex operations. The integration of these diverse personnel requires careful management to ensure loyalty and prevent security breaches, while the cultural differences between various species can create both challenges and opportunities for innovative tactical approaches. The Aeldari movement that emerged in recent centuries has created unprecedented disruptions within traditional Drukhari society, challenging fundamental assumptions about the relationship between life and death while offering the possibility of liberation from Slaanesh's eternal hunger. The emergence of Ivrain as a prophet of the Aeldari death god Ennead has attracted followers from across the Aeldari diaspora, including significant numbers of Drukhari who see the movement as an opportunity to escape the parasitic existence that has defined their species since the fall. The theological implications of the Aeldari message directly contradict the philosophical foundations of Dark City society, creating tensions that threaten to tear apart the careful political balances that have maintained stability for millennia. The response of Commorragh's ruling factions to the Aeldari movement has been characterized by a combination of violent suppression and careful political maneuvering designed to minimize the disruptive effects of the new ideology while preventing its complete elimination. The most conservative elements within Drukhari society view the movement as a dangerous heresy that threatens the fundamental principles upon which their civilization is built, while more pragmatic leaders recognize that the movement's appeal to certain segments of the population cannot be entirely suppressed through force alone. The resulting tensions have created new factional divisions that cut across traditional organizational boundaries, complicating the political landscape in ways that continue to evolve. The theological challenges posed by Aeldari doctrine extend beyond simple religious differences to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of Aeldari existence and the possibility of redemption for a species that has embraced predation as a survival strategy. The promise of liberation from Slaanesh's hunger offers an alternative to the endless cycle of raiding and torture that has defined Drukhari society, while the concept of death as a transition rather than an ending challenges the resurrection technologies that have provided a form of immortality for the Dark City's elite. The integration of these new ideas into existing belief systems requires significant modifications to traditional Drukhari philosophy and cultural practices. The practical implications of Inari influence within Commorragh have manifested in various forms of civil unrest and factional conflict, as supporters of the movement clash with traditionalist forces seeking to maintain the established order. The most significant of these conflicts have involved attempts by Inari sympathizers to liberate slave populations and disrupt the torture facilities that provide psychic sustenance for the Dark City's inhabitants. The response to these activities has required the deployment of substantial security forces and the implementation of new surveillance measures designed to identify and neutralize potential converts before they can organize effective resistance movements. The political maneuvering surrounding the Inari movement has created opportunities for ambitious leaders to advance their positions by aligning themselves with either side of the theological divide, while the resulting instability has allowed some factions to expand their influence at the expense of rivals distracted by religious controversies. The most successful political operators are those who can navigate these complex relationships while maintaining flexibility to adapt their positions as circumstances change and new developments emerge. The long-term consequences of the Inari movement for Drukhari society remain unclear, as the fundamental contradictions between the movement's message and the practical requirements of life in Commorragh have yet to be fully resolved. The influence of the Inari movement on Drukhari military operations has been relatively limited, as the practical requirements of raiding and territorial defense continue to demand the same tactical approaches and organizational structures that have proven effective for millennia. However, the ideological divisions created by the movement have affected unit cohesion and command relationships in some organizations, as personnel struggle to reconcile their professional obligations with their evolving religious beliefs. The most significant military impacts have occurred in situations where Inari sympathizers have attempted to sabotage operations or provide assistance to potential victims of Drukhari raids. The relationship between the Inari movement and the broader Aeldari diaspora has created new possibilities for cooperation between Drukhari factions and their Craftworld cousins, as shared religious beliefs provide common ground that transcends traditional philosophical differences. The participation of prominent Drukhari figures in Inari activities has demonstrated that the theological divide between different Aeldari factions may be less insurmountable than previously believed, while the movement's emphasis on unity and redemption offers a framework for collaboration that does not require the abandonment of cultural identity or tactical expertise. The technological and scientific implications of Inari doctrine have yet to be fully explored, as the movement's emphasis on death and rebirth may require significant modifications to existing resurrection technologies and life support systems. The research programs investigating these possibilities represent some of the most controversial scientific activities currently underway within Commorragh, as they challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness and the relationship between mind and body. The potential applications of this research extend beyond simple theological concerns to encompass practical questions about the sustainability of Drukhari civilization and the possibility of alternative approaches to survival in a hostile galaxy. The existence of every Drukhari within Commorragh's dimensional expanse revolves around a fundamental paradox that defines their entire civilization. The very isolation that protects them from Slaanesh's eternal hunger simultaneously condemns them to a parasitic existence that requires the constant infliction of suffering upon others. This cruel necessity transforms every aspect of their society into a machine designed for the systematic harvesting of pain, creating a civilization where cruelty becomes not merely a cultural preference, but an absolute requirement for survival. The The psychic energy released by the agony of their victims serves as the only sustenance capable of slowing the gradual consumption of their souls by she who thirsts, creating an addiction to suffering that permeates every level of Drukhari society, from the lowliest Kabalite warrior to the most powerful archon. The biological mechanisms that govern this parasitic relationship operate through principles that the Drukhari themselves do not fully understand, as the knowledge necessary to comprehend their condition was lost during the fall, along with much of their species' scientific heritage. What remains clear is that the dimensional barriers protecting Commorragh sever the natural connection between Aeldari souls and the psychic currents that normally sustain their kind, creating a spiritual void that can only be temporarily filled through the absorption of suffering generated by other sentient beings. The process requires direct exposure to intense emotional trauma, with the most effective sustenance coming from victims who experience prolonged agony while maintaining full consciousness and awareness of their situation. The quantity of suffering required to sustain a single Drukhari varies significantly based on their age, social status, and the extent of their previous exposure to psychic energy absorption. The ancient archons who have ruled Commorragh for millennia require enormous quantities of refined agony to maintain their existence, necessitating the systematic torture of hundreds or thousands of victims to provide adequate sustenance for extended periods. Lesser members of Drukhari society can survive on smaller amounts of suffering, though even the most junior Kabalite warriors must participate in regular raids or torture sessions to prevent the gradual weakening that precedes soul consumption by Slaanesh. The philosophical implications of this dependency extend far beyond simple survival requirements to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of existence and the moral framework that governs civilized behavior. The Drukhari have developed elaborate justifications for their predatory lifestyle, constructing ideological systems that portray their victims as inherently inferior beings whose suffering serves a greater purpose in sustaining a superior form of life. These rationalizations allow individual Drukhari to maintain psychological stability while participating in activities that would drive most sentient beings to madness, creating a collective delusion that transforms systematic cruelty into a form of natural law. The rejection of traditional Aeldari spiritual practices represents a deliberate abandonment of the philosophical frameworks that once guided their species toward enlightenment and cultural achievement. The path system that provides structure and meaning for Craftworld Aeldari is viewed by the Drukhari as a cowardly retreat from the realities of existence, a self-imposed limitation that prevents the full expression of their species' potential for sensation and experience. The infinity circuits that preserve the souls of dead Craftworld inhabitants are seen as prisons that trap consciousness in artificial constructs, rather than allowing it to experience the full range of possibilities available to living beings. The substitution of predation for spiritual development has created a culture that values immediate gratification over long-term growth, personal power over collective achievement, and the infliction of suffering over the creation of beauty or knowledge. The artistic traditions that flourish within Commorragh focus almost exclusively on the aestheticization of pain and the celebration of cruelty, with the most admired works being those that can induce psychological trauma in observers while demonstrating the artist's mastery of techniques for maximizing suffering. The scientific research conducted within the Dark City concentrates on the development of new methods for extracting and concentrating psychic energy from unwilling subjects, rather than the exploration of natural phenomena or the advancement of knowledge for its own sake. The internal contradictions that characterize Drukhari society create constant tensions between the individualistic impulses that drive their predatory behavior and the sophisticated cooperation required to maintain their artificial environment. The successful operation of Commorragh's complex infrastructure demands extensive coordination between different factions, careful resource management, and the maintenance of technological systems that require specialized knowledge and skills. The dimensional pocket's stability depends on the continuous operation of generators and stabilizers that must be maintained by teams of technicians working in concert, while the portal networks that enable raiding operations require coordinated scheduling and security arrangements that involve multiple organizations. The hierarchical structures that govern cabal organization provide frameworks for cooperation while channeling competitive impulses in directions that serve broader organizational objectives. The complex webs of obligation and mutual dependency that bind different factions together create incentives for collaboration, even among groups that harbor deep mutual animosity, as the failure of essential systems would threaten the survival of all inhabitants regardless of their factional affiliations. The most successful Drukhari leaders are those who can balance the competing demands of personal advancement and collective survival, using their understanding of these contradictions to manipulate rivals, while ensuring that their actions do not undermine the fundamental systems that sustain their civilization. The economic systems that govern resource distribution throughout Commorragh operate according to principles that combine market mechanisms with political allocation, creating hybrid arrangements that reflect both the practical requirements of maintaining a complex society and the power relationships that determine access to scarce resources. The slave markets that serve as distribution centers for captured victims function as commercial enterprises where supply and demand determine prices, while the allocation of raiding opportunities and territorial assignments reflects political considerations that reward loyalty and punish opposition. The most valuable resources are those that cannot be produced within the dimensional pocket, creating dependencies on successful raiding operations that bind the entire society to its predatory lifestyle. The technological infrastructure that enables Commorragh's existence requires constant maintenance and periodic upgrades that demand resources and expertise that can only be obtained through continued predation upon real space civilizations. The captured suns that provide illumination for the dark city gradually deteriorate under the unnatural conditions of their imprisonment, requiring the periodic acquisition of replacement stellar bodies through massive raiding operations that can take decades to plan and execute. The dimensional stabilizers that maintain the pocket's integrity consume exotic materials that must be harvested from specific types of worlds, while the portal generators that enable Webway access require rare elements that can only be found in certain galactic regions. The social mechanisms that maintain order within a society built upon systematic cruelty operate through carefully calibrated systems of fear, reward, and mutual surveillance that prevent the kind of chaotic violence that would destroy the cooperative arrangements necessary for survival. The threat of punishment for violations of established hierarchies serves as a deterrent against excessive individualism, while the promise of advancement through successful participation in collective activities provides incentives for cooperation. The most effective control systems are those that channel aggressive impulses toward external targets while maintaining internal stability through the strategic distribution of opportunities for advancement and the systematic elimination of potential sources of disruption. The cultural traditions that have evolved within Commorragh reflect the fundamental contradictions of a society that requires both sophisticated cooperation and systematic cruelty to maintain its existence. The elaborate etiquette systems that govern interactions between different social classes serve to minimize conflicts that could disrupt essential operations, while the artistic movements that celebrate individual achievement provide outlets for competitive impulses that might otherwise threaten collective stability. The educational systems that prepare young Drukhari for adult roles emphasize both the technical skills necessary for maintaining complex systems and the psychological conditioning required to participate in predatory activities without experiencing debilitating moral conflicts. The emergence of the Great Rift has created unprecedented challenges for Drukhari civilization, as the massive warp storm has disrupted Webway passages throughout the galaxy while creating new opportunities for chaos incursions that threaten the dimensional barriers protecting Commorragh. The instability introduced by this galactic catastrophe has forced major modifications to raiding strategies and defensive arrangements, while the increased warp activity has made certain types of psychic energy harvesting more dangerous and unpredictable. The most significant long-term consequence may be the gradual degradation of Webway infrastructure that could eventually isolate Commorragh from its hunting grounds, forcing the Drukhari to develop alternative survival strategies or face extinction. The influence of the Aeldari movement within Commorragh has created ideological divisions that threaten the philosophical foundations upon which Drukhari society is built, offering the possibility of liberation from Slaanesh's hunger while challenging the predatory lifestyle that has defined their civilization for millennia. The theological implications of Aeldari doctrine directly contradict the rationalizations that allow individual Drukhari to participate in systematic torture and exploitation, creating cognitive dissonance that has led to civil unrest and factional conflicts throughout the Dark City. The promise of redemption through the awakening of Ennead appeals particularly to younger Drukhari who have not yet become fully integrated into the established power structures, creating generational tensions that complicate traditional authority relationships. The practical challenges posed by Aeldari influence extend beyond simple ideological disagreements to encompass fundamental questions about the sustainability of Commorragh's economic and social systems. The liberation of slave populations advocated by Aeldari sympathizers would eliminate the primary source of psychic sustenance that enables Drukhari survival, while the rejection of torture and exploitation would undermine the cultural practices that provide meaning and structure to their society. The resolution of these contradictions requires either the complete suppression of Aeldari influence or the development of alternative survival strategies that do not depend on the systematic infliction of suffering. The changing galactic landscape created by recent developments, including the return of Robute Guilliman, the emergence of Primaris space marines, and the expansion of various Xenos threats, has altered the strategic environment within which Drukhari raiding operations must function. The improved coordination between Imperial forces and the deployment of new technologies designed specifically to counter Xenos raids have reduced the success rates of traditional Drukhari tactics, forcing adaptations that require significant resource investments and organizational changes. The most successful raiding forces are those that can adapt quickly to changing conditions while maintaining the mobility and surprise advantages that have historically ensured their effectiveness. The future of Commorragh remains uncertain as the various pressures created by external threats, internal contradictions, and ideological challenges converge to create a crisis that may ultimately determine whether Drukhari civilization can survive in its current form. The fundamental dependency on suffering that defines their existence appears increasingly unsustainable as potential victims develop better defenses and alternative philosophies gain influence within their society. The resolution of these challenges will likely require unprecedented changes to the social, economic, and political systems that have governed the Dark City for millennia, potentially transforming the Drukhari into something entirely different from what they have been since the fall. The eternal struggle that defines Drukhari existence continues to evolve as new challenges emerge and old certainties crumble under the pressure of changing circumstances. The parasitic relationship with real space that has sustained Commorragh for 10,000 years faces threats that may prove insurmountable without fundamental changes to the philosophical and practical frameworks that govern their civilization. Whether the Drukhari can adapt to these challenges while maintaining their essential nature, or whether they will be forced to abandon their predatory lifestyle in favor of alternatives that offer genuine redemption, remains the central question that will determine the fate of the Dark City and all who dwell within its twisted spires. The answer to this question will will ultimately depend on whether the Drukhari can overcome the internal contradictions that have defined their society since its inception, finding ways to cooperate and create rather than simply consume and destroy in their endless quest for survival in a galaxy that grows ever more hostile to their existence.